Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ape Nation, your number one source for all things Planet of the Apes on YouTube. My name is Josh, and today we are doing a really interesting, really different, and something that I think is going to be really exciting and fun. We're doing a live watch along of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes to celebrate the 1 year, well, almost 1 year anniversary of the release of the
Yeah.
movie. And to do that, we're doing something with a special guest who has been on the channel not once but twice already and who is here for a third time. Someone I'm very excited to talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Wes Ball, the director of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, is here. Wes, how you doing?
Hello, all. This will be the first time for me doing this, so we'll see how this goes. I am currently in New Zealand in my hotel room for a different movie, and yeah, we're gonna have fun together. We'll see. Well, hopefully you guys have questions and we'll talk and we'll keep it casual and loose and maybe we'll learn something along the way.
Awesome. Without further ado, let's first pull up some questions that we had people send in early before we get started the movie. I'll give you guys a few minutes. I know we're starting this about 10 minutes earlier than I said I was going to, but um, I have a bunch of questions here that we can do before the movie gets started, and then at around 8:10, 8:15, we'll get started and play the movie. And for everyone wondering how this is going to work is we have the movie. I have the movie right here on my own copy. Obviously, for copyright reasons, I cannot show the movie on YouTube. But right now, I have it at 0002, so 2 seconds into the movie. I'm going to give you all a countdown. We're all going to be able to hit play at the same exact time. So when that happens, we'll go three, two, one, play, and we'll all be in sync with each other. And if you need
I should
to,
probably do the same thing,
yeah,
shouldn't I, Josh?
you probably should. Might be helpful. Um,
I'm gonna load it up. Luckily, I have a copy.
I would hope so. I would hope you have a copy. Um, and so once we're all live, and don't, if you have to like get up and go to the bathroom or go get a snack, whatever you got to do, um, you can, just pause the stream and the movie at the same time, come back. You'll be out of time with where we're at, but you can still catch up to the stream. So,
Don't pause the
uh,
movie. You just go and you run back.
just like the movie theater.
It's live, baby. We'll do it live. Hey, what was
So,
that? What was the time that you said, Josh?
2 seconds in. So right when the
2 seconds.
Fox logo is starting.
I'll just start at 0. Cool.
Perfect. So
Yeah, we'll have fun together, guys.
yeah, I think there's gonna be a lot of
Try to keep up
fun.
with comments, but
Don't worry
look.
about that. I'm gonna pull all the comments up so you can just focus on whatever you want to talk about. Before we get started, so Wes, what do you want to? A year removed from the movie. I guess you probably finished it about a year ago now. Um, and so, what do
Yeah, I guess so.
looking
Yeah.
back? What do you got to say, like reflecting on it, or how do you feeling in
Oh gosh,
since it's
yeah.
come
I
out?
mean, hey, it was a real honor to be a part of the franchise. It's like I grew up on that original 1968 version, watching that thing, and when we got the chance to kind of, when someone at the studio asked me, like, what would you do in the next Planet of the Apes movie? There was a blank slate. There was nothing, no ideas of where to go. And I've said this story before, but like I wasn't really um I wasn't really sure how to follow up the previous trilogy, which was done so incredibly well. And so here we were with this opportunity to kind of play in this new kind of, storied legacy of this franchise, this Planet of the Apes movie. It was kind of hard to turn down the opportunity, but our way in was to kind of, it's not really a reboot, it's more of like a continuation of that story, but to gain enough distance from it so that we could kind of chart a new path essentially. And I think that was the right choice looking back on it. I think where ultimately the franchise can go now, it's just kind of endless, of this. I mean, it's like 50 plus years or something, right? This thing's gone on. So I'm just honored to have been played a part in it all, basically. And you always learn things from all. It's only my fourth movie, so there's plenty of things I can look at and say, ah, I could have done that better or whatever it is. But you live and learn and move on. But it was all around just a fantastic experience with the crew and the cast, and in the studio, and just the just the fans out there, that the reaction to the movie and stuff was all it's all fantastic stuff. So like I said, I feel really kind of grateful to have had the opportunity and to be a part of this whole thing. So it was fantastic for me.
Awesome. I mean, I've seen the movie a handful of times now. It's one of something I like about the movie a lot, and I don't know if you have anything to say about this, but it I mean, intentionally, it harkens back to the original 1968 movie,
Oh yeah, there's plenty of
and
those
just
little like little
yeah,
places that sort of like
yeah,
you feel the DNA of that. Was kind of honestly
yeah,
our big thing, was like, how do we have the DNA of that 68 version and the trilogy that came before, the Caesar trilogy? Like, how do we build that bridge between those two kind of worlds? So that was really the beginnings of that, was in this movie. That was like an immediate thing early on that I thought was really important to kind of try to do, and we did our best there.
yeah. And the original movie, it's one of those where there are times when I'm like, I just want to put it on just to have it on because it's fun to look at, or I just like looking at the world, or it's the aesthetic is really cool. And you brought that into the 21st century. Like you took that thing that we all fell in love with when we watched the original movie, and you presented it with modern day filmmaking and modern day technology with the CGI and the just the production of it all. And it's just I love looking at it. Like just the way, especially like all the stuff in the first 30 minutes, just getting to see the apes interacting with each other in the this
Yeah, the little
new
world.
era of
Yeah,
them.
it's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. It's really cool. So I think the world building especially is one of the biggest standouts for me.
That was
Um,
also, by the way, another really conscious decision, is like, when we asked, like, okay, what do we do? It's like, we can't just repeat what happened before. So a big part of it was, we have to get out of Vancouver, for a shooting location. We need to go somewhere else, and so we knew we were going to take place somewhere on the West Coast, which we don't really officially say it, but it's, I kind of set it around Los Angeles essentially, then Southern California. But we wanted to get sunlight in the movie. We wanted to make the movie feel like it's a different world, essentially. It wasn't that kind of Seattle, Northern California look. And and we wanted to kind of take people on a journey through a world this time. And like to see this kind of like locations, and this kind of big adventure, this sprawling adventure over a world that was kind of forgotten. This kind of idea of Noah setting out and rediscovering a world that was lost to time. That was like a really kind of appealing part of the potential of it all. You know what I mean? So that was exciting, that the world creation aspect of it all.
yeah, I think it was something that wasn't missing from the prior three movies, but it's something that I think you just took to the next level. It really it's to me it's a highlight. It was so cool to see, and just with everything with the Eagle Clan and just getting to see other part. Obviously, we don't go too far away from like the West Coast, but going to doing a little more traveling all over and just seeing what this world looks like 300 years later or however many hundred years later it is, and how apes look and how they interact with each other in different intersects of them. It's really really cool.
Just imagine what New York might look like now. The East Coast, all
Is
those
that
things.
something?
It's like they set the table to like really explore a lot of stuff that can kind of connect back to those original movies.
I'm
So yeah, that was a fun aspect of it all, right? It's just the beginnings of that world that we originally saw 50 something years ago, whatever it was, a little under 50, I guess, but really cool.
I'm sure I'm sure someone might ask that already, but is that something you think could potentially happen in a future movie? We might travel to another part of the world, see New York,
Oh,
see the Statue
I'd
of
love
Liberty.
to, personally. That we'll see what happens with sort of my involvement, to a degree, because I am currently sort of working on another movie right now, and so it just depends whether the studio will kind of sort of wait for me or not. But obviously, all the people involved with the creation of this movie, we've had many many conversations, of course, of like where this can ultimately go. But I think you'd want to see that. You'd want to see the world expand a little bit, and start think of it as you know think of it as something that kind of connects to those original movies. Now, not that we can't do our own thing. There's a kind of a loose canon to all these movies anyway. They're all sort of loosely connected. It's not super rigid like a lot of other franchises. But I think the fun part would be sort of building back to that original OG thing. Even if it takes six movies, you know what I mean. There's plenty of runway there. But start to think about those things, and how apes came to the point of deciding to create this incredible, or covering up all the truth about humanity. What caused that? Where did that come from? You know what I mean? It's like to build all these kind of, we started touching on a lot of these ideas that you see in those movies, a lot of the themes, but there's still a long way to go, I think, before we kind of, those ends meet. You know what I mean? So that's a lot of fun for anyone that kind of loves these apes movies, I think, you know.
Yeah. All right. So before we get started, I'm going to run through a handful of these questions that we got early, and then we will get started with the movie. So first one we got that came in at the time. Okay. From Retro Gamer, question for Wes: how and why did you come up with the idea for Eagles and the Eagle Clan?
Yeah, so Eagle Clan, that was actually a really early idea. When I was just kind of conceiving of, the movie, and I was like thinking, nah, I don't really want to do this. I just had this image, and there's this concept art by my friend Andre Wallen who did for me. I just had this image pop in my head of these apes climbing on these old skyscrapers that are completely overgrown, that almost look like mountains, that basically a natural environment. And obviously, we opened the movie on that scene, and I was playing around this idea that, if the previous movies were apes in their stone age, this is about apes and they're entering into the bronze age, essentially. And so playing with those kind of themes and concepts of like our own, humanity's own sort of like, march through progression and everything was, domestication of animals, and using them as like companions for hunting and companionship, that kind of stuff. And so, the immediate thought was what we did with dogs, and I was like, oh, we can't do dogs, so I said, oh, do we do something else? And I did a concept art with, like, they had hyenas at one point. There was somewhere out there an image of that, with these pet hyenas that apes had, which I was able to use it in future movies. But eventually, I arrived at, of course, eagles. You know what I mean? And these amazing kind of skyscraper towers that are perfect kind of nesting zones for these birds of prey. And that immediately kind of launched into this idea of apes, these young apes on this kind of ritualistic climb, and this kind of way of life, essentially, about how they get the eggs, and this kind of rite of passage. And it just started to kind of open up all these kind of opportunities and story ideas. Again, didn't know where it was going to go ultimately, but that's kind of ultimately where it came from. And then just the image of, like, an ape on a horseback with an eagle on his arm, it's like, I'll see that movie. That seems cool, that seems like a good start. So it was kind of one of those things where you just kind of, you smell it, and then you just run with it, you know what I mean? And see where it takes you. And then Josh and Rick and Amanda, who came in on the story front, they really kind of found ways to kind of connect things and use things and launch off from some of these ideas that are just kind of just basic instincts, you know what I mean? So that's kind of where it came from. It's cool stuff, though. I love it.
Awesome. So I'm going to do a few more questions here. It's from Gabe. Hi, Wes. How hard was it to create the characters and their personalities? And is there any chance Proximus could have survived the fall? I'm a big fan. Keep up the good work.
The question I always get, him and Raka, man. I can't tell you. Obviously, we'll see. Anything can happen in these movies, of course. But in terms of Proximus, getting wiped out, he had a tragic end, of course. And it's a it's a bittersweet sort of thing, that with the Proximus character, people love him so much. He's an awesome character. Kevin just really brought him to life, and people want more of him. And I understand. I understand why, and I understand the desire for it. Maybe that's a good thing. You leave them wanting more. So maybe that's actually a good thing to have, rather than overstaying your welcome. But who knows in the future what could happen? Anything could possibly happen. But he is an absolutely fantastic character that was awesome in his own right, but also served as a really great kind of mirror towards Noah, and sort of on his journey. I think that's still to come, of course. What was the other question about there?
It was
Oh,
how
the
hard
characters'
was it to create
personalities.
the characters'
Yeah.
personalities? Yeah.
Yeah, so like in all the characters, I mean, like, I think a lot of credit needs to go to Josh, our writer, who really kind of cracked the first story, and then Rick and Amanda, who are producers, and they were the writers on the very first kind of reboot Caesar trilogy, and producers on the subsequent movies. So they were kind of involved from the very beginning too, and we would just all get in a room together, for a couple months, right before the pandemic hit, essentially during 2019 or something, and we would just riff on these character types. We knew early on that I felt like it needed to have a younger kind of protagonist this time, as a kind of a coming of age story, essentially, that felt like something different, than sort of the Caesar story, with this kind of this leader who was burdened by responsibility. Essentially, we wanted to do something that was about a character rediscovering a world, and seeing the kind of movie, the story play out through his eyes. And so, yeah, we all just kind of sat together and just kind of figured out these kind of character types. And then the actors come in and they bring in a whole different kind of vibe and life to these characters. You know what I mean? They really, that's sort of my job, I think, as a director is I'm not one of those directors that kind of goes in and sort of like, stuffs them full of ideas and thoughts and all this kind of stuff. We have lots of conversations about the character types, what inspires them, proper backstory type stuff. But then after when the cameras start rolling, I let them become the authors of their characters. Like that is their job essentially. I think they take a lot of pride in that. And they have this little like 8-9 week period of ape camp essentially. They learn how to move like apes, but also how to think like apes, to also how to like kind of and create their characters for themselves. And I can tell a story later about like Anaya, Travis who plays Anaya, how he came up with this little idea. He has this little arm thing. He always walks around with this arm kind of this way. And where that came from is he had this idea that when he was a little small baby chimp, that he had this little basic toy that he carried around everywhere in his arm. He always carried it. And as he grew up, eventually the toy got broken and it got thrown away, but he still had this kind of weird, arm kind of posture that he always carried around with him. And so it's like these are the kind of things that all the actors do for themselves to kind of make these characters really super real and rich and personality wise, believable. And and so yeah, it was a fantastic kind of collaboration, I think, on all of our parts, to kind of create characters that were hopefully distinct. And then also a lot of credit goes into the Weta digital where we design the look of these characters. It's really important to not confuse what character is which. Each character needs to look distinct from the other, so that we're not saying, "Wait, was that guy or that guy?" And hopefully, people watch the movie that there's no clarity issues there, because that could be like, obviously the last thing you want when you're in kind of some kind of emotional kind of drama scene or something. To like, who's this again? You know what I mean? So we take a lot of care on all those things to make sure the characters are distinct and real.
So, next question comes from Matt's. Kingdom ends with a scene of intelligent humans communicating. It feels like another ape human war. What do you say to Apes fans who are skeptical that Kingdom is going to be a soft reboot of Dawn and War?
I don't think it'll be a soft reboot of Dawn of War, but these movies are always centered around sort of the interactions between apes and humans, right? That's just kind of the reality of things. That's where the good drama and the real story is. That's what makes this franchise, I think, tick and have lasted for as long as it has for these decades. So there's still plenty of original stories for us to tell, and I think a lot of surprises that we're very aware of that. I think. That criticism, I suppose. But do not worry. I think we have ideas of where ultimately that's all can kind of lead itself.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Here we go. Here's another one from David Arellano. Wes, can you please give us a story of what happened to the vault? Why is it abandoned? There were humans before. If they were, did they die by the flu or starvation? Sorry to ask this, but I did love that.
That's a good question. We all kind of have our own thinking behind the origins of that thing. But I feel like I don't want to necessarily, spoil anything or confirm anything. But I think if you think about society, human society, the kind of last stand that would happen, even after war, with what you saw happen all around the world, there would probably be these monumental efforts that people would go through everything that whole world governments even to try to protect the human race, just kind of save things. And ultimately, as we all know, just being fans of this franchise, um, it's a fool's errand. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work. The human race does fall. So you can imagine a couple ways. You could go there where it was some kind of the virus got in, didn't work. You could imagine a thing where it's just people died out. People, we have throughout our history of human civilizations, there are plenty of cities that just stopped. They ceased to exist for various reasons, and they just were abandoned. And we can find them now in the Amazonian jungles and stuff, or in South America. You see these evidence of civilizations that just burned out essentially for various reasons. I think it's just a really fascinating kind of idea, and I can imagine there's a lot more of those, throughout scattered across the world. But yeah, so I don't want to confirm anything because it might kind of spoil some things for future movies. But thought it was just a neat visual that kind of allowed you to kind of fill in the blanks yourself, essentially. Of this sort of ghost town, essentially, of an ancient sort of world where humans tried to hold on.
Okay, next question from Bookworm
I did
Dazzle.
not have a cameo in the movie, although I did have some sounds I think I made here and there. But I do try to do that sometimes. I try to slip myself
Really?
in little shots here and there. I think I got killed by a griever in one of the Maze Runner movies. But in this movie I didn't quite make it, other than just like sounds, and a lot of the a lot of the animators would I would act things out a lot of times, and they would use me to do that kind of stuff. So anyway, I
That's
made it in
that
way through in spirit, but not in any kind of direct way.
that's fun. That sounds fun. Okay, Bookworm Dazzle. My favorite part was Noah and May's dynamic. Can you describe what it was like to maintain that balance where they're not quite friends, not enemies, with their status being more like it's complicated?
Yeah, it's complicated. That's right. It's like that's where it gets interesting and messy. Essentially, is that zone where enemies and friends and indoctrination on both sides. They both have ideas in the beginning of the movie of who the other species is. And I think that's all challenged as they go on the adventure together. And ultimately, they wind up in a place at the end of the movie where that's not a full arc. It's just the beginning of an arc. There's still much more story to tell there. But you see, hopefully, the beginnings of their worldview is kind of, challenged essentially, and they're wrestling with that. And I think, like most people in reality, they they are not easily changed. It's not going to happen in one little span of a little adventure together. It's going to take time. So hopefully we left it in a place where there's a lot of great questions and great opportunities that where we can kind of explore further as the stories carry on between those two characters.
All right, so we're gonna do one more question. It's a very simple one that I already know Wes can't give an answer to, but I'm gonna ask it because it'll be fun. And then after that, we will move on to getting the movie started. So I'll give you guys instructions on that. So final question before we get started from Wonder TBH. Wes, can we get a yes or no for a 2027 Planet of the Apes release date?
I Let's say this. I know that the studio is very much wants it to be in 2027, but I also know that the studio and all the creators involved will not rush this if it's not right. They all love this franchise too much, myself included, and that you know there's no reason to rush a release date. Is to get the story right, to get this the kind of you know, you almost want to work on basically 2 and 3 at the same time, essentially. You really want to just kind of map those 3 out. Once the first one was a success and kind of proved the rule, that this could work. I think you go in knowing that you want to, finish these 2 movies out together. And so there's still a lot of work to be done. But there's also the complicated issue is that right now I'm in New Zealand working on the next different movie. And so it's just going to come down to a question of scheduling and time for myself, but also, where ultimately the kind of creative kind of direction sort of ends up. So I can't confirm or deny anything really, except that we'd love for it to happen. But I think we all want to do it right.
Gotcha. Awesome. Great answer. And that's the answer I want to hear because I want you guys to take as much time as you need to make an awesome movie, just like you did with
Yeah, right.
Kingdom.
And that's the good thing. The franchise is in good hands with the new Steve Asbell, the head at 20th Century there, and 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 in Disney as well. I think they really want to make sure that they do this well. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
fear not.
Quick shout out to Steve Asbell because honestly, last year I think Fox did or I guess not Fox anymore, but 20th Century did a great job with all the picking up all these old franchises that Disney never owned and doing with
That's right.
Alien, with
Yeah.
Omen, Apes. So I think they did a great job. All
Yeah,
right.
he's doing a great job, and then Scott Eversana too, our executive there at studio. I mean, we don't really have I don't have that typical like, oh, the studio. I mean, they're
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
partners in this thing. So
yeah.
shout out to them. They don't get a lot of credit, of course. Usually they're the butt of jokes, but they do a really great job, and they
So
care a lot about movies.
yeah, exactly. All right. Well, everybody, the time has come. We were going to get started with our watch along of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Like I said, I am at the code of 2 seconds. If you start it right as the movie starts, probably not going to be that far out of sync, but that is where I am hitting play from. Again, I'm going to count down from three, two, one, and we can all hit play at the same time. If you need to get up, you can just pause the movie and the stream at the same time. Come back to it. You'd be out of where we're at, but you can still watch it in sync. So, with all that said, let's get started with our watch along with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Wes, any final words before we get started?
Let's do this, baby.
All right, let's do this, baby. Let's go. In three, two, one, play. Ah,
I think
all right.
actually this might be one of the first new logos, because we started this movie, Planet of the Apes,
Yeah.
before it was 20th Century Studios. It was 20th Century Fox, and then the Disney merger happened, all this kind of stuff. So it might be one of the first, or one of the very early movies to actually have the new logo.
Yeah, I think it might have been the last Avatar movie that was the first or something like that.
Think
Or,
so?
maybe.
It's possible. Yeah, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're I
Yeah,
know they
you're in
were the
that crop
first
of the
big
first. Yeah.
movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
in that kind of the new regime, essentially. That's why
Yeah.
there was a lot of pressure on this movie. This guy had to deliver, had to perform.
All
This
right.
little like opening kind of text thing was added right at the last minute, essentially,
Really?
very late in the game, because there were too many people that weren't familiar enough with the previous Apes movies. When I originally just opened up like right here, boom, right in his face. 'Cause, like, people know who he is, but there were so many people that, while they say they love the Apes movies, they weren't familiar with the story at all. They thought Caesar was still alive. So like there was a lot of confusion happening with just people that were familiar enough with the Apes movies, but didn't know all about the story. So that kind of is a good example of what you have to kind of deal with these Apes movies, where they're so rich with lore and previous backstory. You really have to be careful that you don't lose the people that aren't familiar with all that stuff, to make it enjoyable for them too. And so that was kind of put in there in the last minute to make sure we kind of catch everyone up to speed, understand what's going on, and so that we can kind of settle in and enjoy the rest of the story.
Yeah. I really was very taken aback. I figured there would be references to Caesar, obviously, and I mean you told me
Hmm.
as much when we first talked, but I never once imagined we'd see the final like minutes after war ended. So that was
Yeah,
just a
it
really nice
felt right
treat.
to me. Like that to me, it was never a question. I wanted to start it here. I wanted to see the end of an ape and the birth of a legend, because that's very much what this kind of, and this kind of poetic idea of these embers and these. There's a deleted scene actually that kind of connects to this, but this idea that apes kind of, it was the birth of almost a religion. You know what I mean? And this spiritual notion of sending his body to the sky, and then that's where Caesar would be when you look up to the stars. Caesar was looking down on us, and Raka had a scene where he told this story essentially. Unfortunately, had to get cut for time, but um, but yeah, it was just a neat kind of way to kind of come into the story, I thought. And then Karen Carnival, she kind of we had obviously a very limited time there with him, but we had a long conversation with her, kind of to get the kind of character of Maurice kind of correct and everything. So she kind of was almost more consultant, I guess, on the movie in a way, but she kind of recorded herself for us so we can kind of do all the animation stuff, and it used the old model and all that kind of stuff. So it was all, hopefully it felt like it kind of came from the previous movie, and then drops us into this world here, which I thought was, for me, this first shot here was the first thing that I did actually. It was the first, like I said, the first concept image that I kind of came up with. Um, but also it's one of the first previous shots that I made, is this specific shot. And then right towards the end of the shoot, right before I went home, I went out into a helicopter and found this little plate we could use, and then put on the CG trees and the buildings and the forest and everything. And Weta just kind of, kicked ass on it.
Yeah,
And
and
all this stuff, by
actually
the way, is full CG. It's like there's no CG in this movie. This whole first 10 minutes is all. I mean, there's no live action. It's all CG. It's all basically virtual production kind of filmmaking here, which was
it's
a
in,
first for me.
it's insane. I look at this and I see. I mean, obviously you know the apes are CGI because they're apes. You can't make apes act like this, but
Yeah, right. We're
it's
kind of
the
we're kind of trained
trees
to
and the
know that and
environment,
understand that. Yeah.
and it's just, but like this trees and the environment and just the way the camera moves through all this stuff. It's just like it's insane that this was created with a computer. Like
Like
these
that right
people, they're
there, it's amazing. All
artists.
that grass, all that wind in the trees, it's like it's really stunning what Weta does. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really, really incredible stuff. And to wield that power essentially was like it's intoxicating, because like you get shots in, you're like, oh my God, that looks real. You know what I mean? It's a really fun kind of thing as like a geek for this kind of visual effects thing, to work with basically the best visual effects artists in the world, where if you dream it up, they can come up with it. It's really fantastic. Um, and I kind of do a lot of long shots, so that makes things really difficult. You know what I mean? A lot of these shots, like the shot alone, is like, it's 30 seconds long or something, but takes a long time to get all that performance working and all the details working and the fur and the wind in the fur and the bugs flying around and all these little layers that just trick your brain into, you don't notice any of it necessarily, but it tricks your brain into thinking that it's real, that the illusion is there. And the challenge, honestly, with doing this virtual production stuff is to figure out how to limit yourself, because a lot of times when you're shooting live action, you know your cameras are sometimes they're dictated by where you can put the camera, or the moves are limited by there's structures in the way, so you can't get certain moves. So you have to be careful about making camera moves that seem impossible. You know what I mean? So a lot of what we try to do here in this opening sequence, and throughout other sequences that are full of CG too, I'll point those out, is actually, you know, actively thinking about how would you shoot this for real and trying to limit yourself in that way, and it helps with the whole process. We make little flashy shots here and there, but for the most part, we try to keep it pretty standard.
Yeah. It's like it's just like the
Yeah,
detail.
someone mentions about the sort of the raw cut that we released, which is
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um
Incredible, by the way.
for anyone who's interested in kind of the technical stuff behind this movie in particular, but also kind of visual effects movies in general, you should watch that raw cut. Now you can get it on like the Steel book or like the 4K. I don't know. I'm not in charge of where the
Yeah,
feature kind of
it's
shows
on
up.
Disney Plus now too, I think.
That's what I would
Anyway.
tell people. If anyone has
Yeah.
Disney Plus, the easiest way to get to it is just to go to this movie on Disney Plus. And there's a little extras tab in there. And in that extras tab, you can actually watch the full movie with top and bottom, the final image, and also the raw mocap, raw visual effects plates essentially. And it's an incredible experience for people that are interested in like kind of the technical stuff on this and how these things are made and how the choices are made, and just also to see how well the actors, incredible actors, Owen in this case, Travis and Lydia, how much they come through, and how much Weta does work wise to kind of make sure that you see those actors in these digital creatures. You know what I mean? It's really, really, really fantastic stuff. So I can't push that more. It's very unusual. It's not usually done, to kind of this little peek behind the curtain. But for me, it was like a no brainer. I wanted to do it, and we pushed hard to make it kind of happen. So maybe it'll become a more regular thing, hopefully. But
I hope so.
if not, at least we have it here on this one.
Yeah, it's honestly,
It's a unique case for sure.
I wasn't blowing smoke. Like it is genuinely one of the best Blu-ray special features I've seen in probably a decade. Like
Yeah.
and part of it is just because special features aren't really much of a thing anymore, which is really sad.
Yeah,
But
which is sad. Yeah.
yeah, and so I just thank you for making it happen, because I've watched The Raw Caught twice, and it's just
Oh, I love
cool.
this
It's
shot.
just so cool.
My favorite shots right there. That eagle swooping in. It's like it just worked. And I should call out my previous team at Halon. Casey was one of our leads there, and he created that shot. After I kind of described it, it's like to stay in that shot and see that eagle coming in right into the camera lens. It's just even in previews, like, oh, this is a great shot, and then Weta just made it. It's just every time, even in a big theater on a big screen, it's like you jump just at that shot. I just love it. It's a perfect example of like a simple shot that just is really, it just works well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool stuff.
So I guess we can get started with a couple of the questions here. Also, before I get to that, actually,
Oh, wait, I
you just
did kind of
mentioned,
consult with ASL experts for,
yeah,
I think it was Jesse said. We
okay,
did early on and talk about that stuff, and the actors also again take it on themselves to kind of learn some of those signs. But it's not a true ASL. It's kind of ape ASL essentially. It's like they kind of come up with these little other kind of ways of doing things essentially. But hopefully that there's some ASL people that will actually kind of recognize from some of the gestures, and kind of see something in there.
I'm curious. I don't know if you know this. Was that the case on the previous three movies?
Yeah, that was, yeah.
Was it? Okay, that's really
Mhm.
okay. That's something I'd always wondered, because I mean I don't know sign language, admittedly. So it's really cool that you did that extra research and put that in the movie. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
you want to make it real, feel real.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah,
it would suck for all the people that kind of know sign language out there to look at this.
yeah,
What are they doing? They're just,
yeah, yeah,
there's those people that are coming out now with like on news segments and or news or like government kind of like things, and people are catching people that they've been hired to do ASL, and they're just actually not doing the stuff. They're fake, they're frauds. They've been caught. So it's like wow that actually happens. But this was a great location, by the way. It's basically looked like this. So we didn't really build this. We found this. It's like it's in the middle of a neighborhood. If you looked over Noah's shoulder in the background, there's a house right there. There's literally a house right up there over his shoulder. But it's just an old, ancient kind of like I think mining town that just kind of got left in disrepair and just it's been overgrowing. And in that one particular, there's actually two tunnels that are sort of somewhat connected. But in this tunnel right here, there's this really rare form of glowworms that are deep in the tunnel that you can go in there. And so we weren't allowed to actually go too far into that tunnel to do the scene. We had to use a different tunnel for that. But it was just a fantastic location. And getting the crew down there and just dealing with that, like the mud that's like up to your knees practically. It was awful, but it looks awesome. you know.
yeah.
Anyway.
It's that. See, I'm always just stunned. I keep talking about the visuals, but I'm always just stunned, especially with Anaya. Anaya, he has a very, I think him more than anyone else looks very much like a real life chimpanzee. And so all the close ups on his face are just insane. And like the
Yeah.
integration with the horses and the CGI
By
and
the way, in
these,
that shot, one horse is real and the rest are CG.
really,
This shot, three horses are real. With stunt riders,
okay,
we didn't have the actors. We had to do the actors separately. But that's kind of the weird puzzle of these movies. Like even here, it's like these aren't my actors writing it; they're the stunt doubles writing it. But then we put our actors on mocap suits,
yeah,
on stage acting out the performance. And so it's this weird blend of multiple people all contributing to this kind of final image. It's really fantastic.
that's what's
But all over the
always
movie,
incredible about
there's
these
because horses
movies.
are really difficult. Yeah, the horses are really difficult, but all over the movie, there's like here's a case that the horses are all CG. We actually shot the plate with real horses, but then it was easier to kind of put with the apes with shorter legs and all this kind of stuff. It's easier to those are real horses, so it's kind of all over. That's the magic trick of the movie is like whatever kind of process it takes to make it feel real. That's what we do.
Yeah. All right. So I got a
And you
question here
also have
for
to
you.
imagine with all these camera moves that you have to actually shoot clean plates too. You have to actually shoot the shot without any of the actors in there too, so you can put the apes in.
Yeah,
So
you're
we're shooting
essentially
the movie
shooting the movie
twice,
twice.
essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it. From Wonder TBH, question for Wes: is there any possibility for a re-release for Kingdom back at theaters? I can only watch this film a million times on my TV.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I'd love for it to see that happen. But that's it's above my pay grade.
Um, all right.
Yeah, it's a good question about the kids and having human voices. Um, we did have kids pretend to be apes, and try to like make their voices, harder. But the kids, they just have vocal voice boxes. So like it I can't say it was exactly what I originally imagined, but it was the best result that we ended up at. But I think you're right that there's an aspect to we ultimately have to get to this place where the apes are kind of talking essentially. They can't be grunting the whole time. So yeah, maybe you can think of it a little bit as evolution, as more and more generations are born, it becomes easier and easier for themselves to talk. And that's the way I kind of justified it.
That was something I'd always wondered during the Caesar era is how do you figure out like how far along in each
Well,
generation can be with
I studied the
talking?
hell out of that. Yeah, I studied the
Really?
hell out
Yeah.
of that. And if you really watch those three movies together, the first movie, I mean, Caesar is barely speaking. He's barely getting those words out. Then go watch War. He's basically talking. Andy's got a great voice,
Yeah,
but he's
he's
basically
had
just
full on
talking.
conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's where we kind of took that. We said, okay, if we took that trajectory and progressed it forward, where do we go from there? You know what I mean? And so we try to find this sweet spot, with Noah in particular, because he's the one that talks the most of everyone. And then there's Raka too. It's just, he has a different kind of challenge where we have Peter who has this incredibly deep resonant voice. And that kind of goes a certain way, but he's super verbose. He's talking like crazy, So it's one of those things where it was one of the leaps we had to make. We knew we had to do more talking in this movie, and how far could we go? And I think it was probably an issue for some people, that just kind of broke the reality for them. But I think hopefully for a lot of people, it just you kind of go with it, and it allows that to kind of let the story progress forward. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's pretty
I
fun
thought it
to
worked.
see
I
it.
thought you did found a good happy medium where they're still
Yeah,
not
it's
fully
tricky.
evolved
Yeah.
with talking, but they're
There's
10 times
also,
farther than when they were.
also mentioning my Eileen, my sound designer, who was my sound designer on the Maze Runner movies, and then became my sound mixer and sound designer on all the previous on this movie in particular here. Um, if you listen to the most work that she did, if you look at the timeline, it's thousands and thousands of tracks. And most of the effort went into the actual dialogue tracks that she would handle, which is a little unusual for sound design and the stuff. But she put in all these little eight grunts and eight little like breath things, just little subtle things that just take it away from human and get it into that kind of chest cavity thing of a chimp. And so there's a tremendous amount of work going into just the dialogue tracks of this movie, and how to try to very lightly steer it and find that kind of sweet spot between ape and human. You know what I mean? So yeah, a lot of really cool stuff there.
I'm gonna pull up another question here. Um, Actually, this is a good one. David Orlano, Wes, why did you consider to stay in the state of California and not expand the world of the saga in other parts of the cities?
Uh, I don't know, a couple of reasons. I wanted to be sunny, and it felt like a natural progression from the kind of San Francisco area that the other movies took place in, to uh, this other kind of tribe that was kind of down south in this kind of you know world. And we shot in Australia ultimately, which looks a lot like, I think, overgrown Los Angeles. It shares a lot of features, a lot of the gum trees and some of the rock features and stuff like that. Um, but like I said, I think in our minds that you will expand to other parts of the country, if not world. So stay tuned.
That's something I'm really excited about.
Yeah,
I
me
actually have a
too. I
question
think it'd
about
be awesome.
I got a question about Koro here, who someone who I wish was in the movie more, and that's what I wanted to get at. Was there ever a point where you had more of him in the movie, at least on the script stage?
Not really, because he serves his purpose. It's
Yeah,
like the movie's long enough. That was my
I agree
biggest
with that.
challenge with the
Yeah,
movie
yeah.
was trying to figure out how to get the movie down. There was a 2 hour 45 minute version of the movie. And it was just too damn long. And but you know the journey of Noah is really his central character, and so he has. If you think about it, he's got like three or four of these father figures that come into his life. You've got obviously his first father, Koro, has a certain kind of rigid kind of view of the world, and then you've got like Raka comes in as kind of like a father figure. You've got Proximus comes in like a father figure, and then by the end of the movie, he's maybe May's not a father figure, but there's certainly another character that kind of shows him a different point of view, essentially. So you leave this character of Noah having been shaped by these multiple figures with different points of view, and you leave Noah with basically on the doorstep of turning into the ape he's ultimately going to become, and being inspired and affected by all these different kind of voices in his head, essentially, right? And so Koro kind of served his purpose. We tried to make him, for the scenes that he was in, we try to make him kind of land, and you
Up,
appreciate him
up.
for what he does, but he serves his purpose, and we move on. You know what I mean? But this location, by the way, this Eagle Camp location was just fantastic. It was a absolute bitch to get to. It was upside of a mountain, and it was incredibly like windy road, and we had, you can imagine these giant 18-ton trucks, and this the footprint of a movie studio on this scale, or a movie production company on this scale, is absolutely massive. And
Uh-oh.
so to get them up the mountain into this world, it was a real effort by the crew, to make it happen. But I think it's so worth it, because like, it's such a cool environment that just feels hidden and isolated and breathtaking at the same time. As a place that you're sad to see gone. When it all happens. But we got some really really cool stuff here in this movie, I thought, in terms of locations. By the way, it's also mentioning, if you look in the background there, we shot this movie in anamorphic with old 1960s Panavision lenses that looked gross and dirty, and
Yeah.
they had this old kind of feel. If you look at that bokeh in the background, right, that's old style movies, man. Like, that's not a modern lens, and it just felt like that's what this movie wanted. And the problem is, it's incredibly difficult to deal with in visual effects, because the lenses are really weird. They do really weird distortions through panning and tilting and focus pulling. And so that's another challenge on top of just making a CG8 that looks photoreal. what it now has to model each one of those lenses and the really weird, peculiar distortions that happen, and apply that to each shot independently, essentially. So it's this extra layer that it really works for the aesthetic in the movie, but it's a real challenge on for a lot of people. You know what I mean? And what's interesting is that as the movie goes on, we start to shift into a different set of anamorphic lenses that are more modern. They're called the T-series lenses, and those are a little bit sharper, a little less dirty. So like as Noah starts to kind of get into sort of the human world, kind of mainly around the Proximus camp area, the lenses themselves actually change, and the kind of the qualities of the lenses themselves change. And it was just kind of a neat idea as we kind of found this progression through kind of the story. Even aesthetically, the world changes here. And by the way, this scene here is awesome. This is a case where you couldn't do clean plates. So this is basically, if you look at the raw cut, Owen is going through this set out on set, and just doing the action, and the camera's all handheld and totally, just kind of spur of the moment. There's no guidance here. It's all just really kind of raw and just kind of real, essentially. And so the only thing that we could do is to paint Noah out of those plates, or paint Owen out of those plates, and put in Noah into those shots. Incredibly difficult stuff here. I mean, all this smoke, all that stuff, they have to put what has to go and comp all that back in. I can't explain to you how difficult these kind of little shots are for such, like, whatever, it was like 8 shots or something. But it's such a vibe. It feels so real and tactile. Again, it's just that effort of not just telling a good story, but to how to achieve the realism and the magic trick here, the illusion that this is possible, this is real, is just kind of like for me, it was a whole new experience. I hadn't had to deal with that kind of challenge before, but it was a ton of fun. Like all that CG, like all the egg, we worked so long on that egg goop and that CG egg goop, and the look of that, to come out, like it was really, really difficult to get that to work. But it's the kind of thing you take for granted and hopefully don't even notice. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
just, you just kind of go with the flow.
that's something I honestly I just don't think about when I watch the movie, which is a good thing. You're not supposed to think about it, but it's when you take a look at it, it's like, how does this CGI thing interact with this thing that's clearly real, or how do these
Yeah.
environments interact, and like and how do they make this shot and pull it all
And
together?
look at
Like
this shot, for
it's crazy.
instance. This shot is like a minute long or something, and hopefully you just go with it. But like that is
Yeah,
incredibly difficult for a visual effects team who has to get all the animation working, because you have to just work on it for months to get it all working. And what's really interesting about this shot in particular is that I shot it wrong. I shot the plate wrong, and so I needed the characters to look left to right, so it would cut to this next shot. And so the way I shot it was they were looking right to left. And so what I realized was something I could do with the power of having a CG character. Essentially, I flopped the plate. Whereas in normal cases with a live action movie, you say, "Well, that person looks different somehow because we're actually mirrored the plate." But here, I can actually take our ape character, the data, the animation data that we shot, and I can just mirror the data. So the character himself stays totally the same, but all his animation data gets flipped. So it's like those kind of little tricks that you have at your disposal when you have a CG movie like this. It's like you can really, it's amazing. I'm going to be spoiled that I don't have that in the next live action movie.
yeah, it's just
Like that's the case
it's
there where all the buildings in the background are fake, but all the stuff in the midground are real. That's a real kind of location that we found. That was an old coal plant. And so, but we'll find ways to always kind of have something real in the frame. We never wanted to go into a full blue screen world if we didn't have to. And then boom, suddenly we cut to full CG. So that the shot previous to this was all on a real location with like real kind of stuff, and then we cut to the rest of the movie here, and the sequence is all full CG, all the plants, all the fog, all the fire, everything. And there's a whole reason for that, because we actually did shoot a version of this scene, but I wasn't happy with it. I didn't like it. I thought we could do better. And so while we were editing the movie, I kind of concocted this version of the scene, which is a little more intense, a little more interesting. And the problem was that the actors were on strike, and so I couldn't go out and shoot the reshoots for this. And so the only thing we had to do, as the time was ticking away and we had to deliver the movie, is that we had to start making this thing full CG. And so that right at the last minute, we got all the plates working, we got all the kind of animation ideas working, and then we would right at the last minute, go out with our actors and we would mocap just the pieces that we needed them, and then drop them in the last minute, and then send the movie off for the theaters. So these are the kind of the challenges that you have on these movies. But look at that, like that's just amazing to me. That's all CG. All the ferns, the fire, the character.
That's
All the camera
that's just
moves.
that's crazy. It's like this isn't one of the like I know which some of
I
the
know.
scenes are
Yeah.
CGI, but like
Yeah.
this is not one of the scenes I would
You wouldn't
expect to
think
be
of
all
that. This right
CGI.
here. This is full
Like this,
CG right here.
like that's a shot I would expect to be Owen in a
Yeah.
mocap suit on shot
And
with a
again,
bush.
not just full
Like
CG, but done kind of, after the fact. We kind of it came at a point where the machine starts spooling up. You know what I mean? And all the incredible artists kind of they really start to kind of know these characters, and they kind of get into a rhythm. And so when I did ask him this, really late in the game, there was like a little there's a sigh of like, okay, we're gonna do this, and then bam, they just hit the ground going, and they just did it. You know what I mean? And it came together so smoothly. You know what I mean? And again, those lenses, the lens distortions, the kind of keeping the cameras very simple. You know, um, it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with these things. It's cool. It was a
something
cool
I really
introduction too to like our characters and all that stuff. Now again, I shot some stuff for this, but most of it was all replaced because we kind of created a new scene. Like now suddenly, that background is CG, but the foreground isn't, or something like that. It's like there's just all these little weird little amalgams of like how you make these movies. It's just really fun to play with.
something I really love, especially we get introduced to here, is the armor of that what all Proximus's apes are
Sure.
wearing. That's one of my favorite elements of it. It's just cool. It's just
Yeah,
getting to
that was like an
see
early
how they've
idea
evolved,
too.
what they look like, how they dress.
Yeah, that was an early idea where it's like again, if the previous movies were like Stone Age, Proximus's world is they're working with metal. You look at their world; they're living in old ships and rusty kind of things, and like there's probably like this blacksmith there that I never got to shoot. We actually did set it up once, but just never made it into one of the shots. But they were starting to work with metal. You know what I mean? And electricity. They rediscovered electricity. What is that? This magic stick that is like this powerful wand essentially. Where does that come from? And of course we have answers for that where the humans kind of able to kind of give some of that stuff. But it's just another neat little idea of like expanding this world with multiple kind of tribes that are kind of going through their own processes of kind of evolution essentially. It's really fun.
See
Yeah,
this
and this stuff
scene.
here,
This is
yeah, it was
incredible.
awesome.
This is one of my, I think, one of the highlights of the movie for me. It's this
It's great.
shot coming up. I don't know if it's this shot or shot coming up, but the one it's like a 30 to 45 second one
Yeah, it's
take.
this shot. Yeah,
Is it just
it's
yeah?
all one take. And
I'm a big fan of one takes. So, and I
yeah,
think this is
you
a
do them
really
right.
really
Yeah,
cool one.
they're really hard to not become gimmicky, one
Yeah,
one take shots. Um, the trick is to keep them around a minute and a half long, basically. Anything over that, you start to kind of notice it, and it becomes really boring. Not always. You look at the kind of new Netflix movie. I forget what it's called. It just came out where almost the entire episodes are in full takes, and it's impressive. It's really difficult to keep the audience on the hook with these long takes and still have it all flow. But yeah, we want to do that here just to kind of create that sense of chaos, and just that sense of immersion of like Noah being lost in this, overwhelming kind of, catastrophe essentially, and then boom, that's where our first cut is right there, when he looks up at that guy. But yeah, in this case, we didn't have all those fires there. We had a few little fire kind of like, tools or a few little fire kind of lines kind of placed here and there. But obviously we couldn't burn the place down like this. So it's, it's a great giant mix of live action plates and stunt performers and actors and visual effects and lighting kind of rigs and all that kind of stuff. So it was a lot of fun. This is kind of our first real introduction, I think, to um, Sylva here, who played by Ika, who just did a fantastic job, really making this guy aggressive, and a badass kind of gorilla, which, you know, I have
I think
plans
his
for other
intro.
other gorilla characters in the future movies, but we'll see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what
I want
I
to see
mean
a good guy
his.
gorilla.
I do too. I think a lot of people would.
That's hopefully
Um,
that'll come. We'll see.
but I really like his intro. It's just hit that surprise of his first line is for Caesar. It's like I
Yeah,
think it
yeah.
hits really hard. It's really it turns
For
things on
fans
your
that
head.
know these stories, like
Yeah, yeah,
what?
yeah,
And hopefully it was like a gut punch, of like, what do you mean
yeah.
it's just Caesar?
I
No. And
I
that's
think it's
kind
a
of the story that we are, or themes that we're exploring in this movie. You know what I mean? About how things can kind of go astray. You know what I mean? and ideologies can
Yeah,
change.
it sets the
That's a
stage
really,
well.
yeah, it's an important idea. And again, if you look at
Um,
the stuff, like, this is where we wanted to really be spontaneous with the camera. It just feels like you're just making it up on the spot, and that's really hard to do in a CG movie like this, or with CG characters like this, because that usually takes so much planning. But it was like a language that we wanted to bring into the Apes movies this time. Really chaotic, you know, um, handheldy kind of stuff, and I think it just helps when it's appropriate, of course. But it was fun to come up with.
so going to some more questions here. One about Noah, from Crimson Mage. Hi Wes, will
Silva
we
does
see
not
Noah?
does not Yeah, by the way, Silva does not kill the elder. He just rips that freaking thing off. But it's
Yeah,
a very violent act for sure.
yeah. Um, so hi Wes, will we see Noah as a villain anti-hero, like as an opposite of Caesar, going through an Anakin Skywalker character arc?
Can't comment, man. It's that we'll have to see. But it's a neat idea.
Yeah. All right.
You could go
Let's see.
anywhere right now with Noah. That's what's cool about him.
Yeah, that's something that I really like about him is that you've
Yes.
created basically a blank slate for
Yeah.
he could go in one way, another way, a way
Yes.
in between. Like there's multiple
I
directions you
think
could take this
I
character.
think that will be the fun to explore, with his
Yeah.
characters. That
There's a
it's
lot
only
of
fun if you
gray.
if you surprise people, basically, and you go places
Yeah.
where we're not expecting, and you have real drama and real conflict, and maybe there's redemption, maybe there's not. We'll see. But it's like, like I said, the right people are involved in this thing, and we'll do a great job with Noah, those character. We've set him up properly now.
Yeah. Another question from Crimson Mage. Last question from me. I always had an impression that humans and apes would coexist in Kingdom. Will we ever see a colony where humans and apes living together in peace?
Yes, I'd like to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, not exactly my choice at this moment, but I think that's a good idea, and to maybe see how that falls apart or not would be fun to play too.
Yeah, it's something we haven't really seen yet. We see it
Yeah,
briefly
it
for
does
five
not
minutes in
have to
Dawn.
just be yeah, it
Yeah.
does not just have to be apes and humans against each other for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
I think everything during this moment, like the ending of this attack on the clan,
Hmm.
Noah waking up, going on his adventure, like it's very Joseph Campbell hero's journey,
Hell
but
yeah, for sure.
it's just done so well. I think it's epic and it really sets the stage, I think, for the rest of the movie, the scale and the scope which you guys pulled off here.
Yeah, like you said, it's a classic kind of coming of age story, and it's about these characters that are thrust into these kind of circumstances that force them to go to places that they didn't want to. You know what I mean? Like Noah at that tunnel was the one who stood back. I don't want to go through there. No, Noah and I don't. And Naya says, no, Noah's scared. That was his refusal of the call in a way, and now he has no choice. He has to go there to go find his family. So that's like classic kind of story tropes that we as human beings are just hardwired to kind of relate to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, next question
Yeah, we
here.
do see this clan. The IU clan is a very isolated community, I think. And probably for good reason, but that is the idea. Whoever asked that, I forgot. I lost the name.
All
But it is very much that they are sort of protected here, and that they might be aware of outsiders, but they try to steer clear of them.
Going off what he said, uh, was there ever any plans on having them, like having other clans besides Proximus's camp and then the Eagle Clan, or was it always just we're just going to focus on the Eagle Clan and we're not going to explore any others yet?
Yeah, we got three clans basically here, right? We got Eagle Clan, we got Raka's world, and then we got Proximus's world, and then we have May's world. So those are kind of the four worlds that we kind of touch on, and yeah, there's room for a lot more, of course. Mhm.
Gotcha. Okay. So Talking Ape says, "So amazing you're doing this, West. Loved Kingdom and saw it several times in IMAX. It's my second favorite, only after the
Wow,
1960
that's
original.
that's
High
uh
praise. High
that's
praise."
high praise. Thank you very much. But yeah, I don't know. I have my favorites, but I'm glad people. All we wanted was at least for the movie to kind of live up to at least belong and good company, with the other movies. I don't definitely claim it's not the best of all of them, but we tried, tried to make it fit, and
Yeah,
belong.
I think it's. I mean, my top. I love my top seven of the entire franchise. Like, there's only
Yeah, yeah, they're
two
all cool.
movies I
They're all
really
interesting.
like. There's only two movies I really don't really like, but like even them, I can watch them and I can find things to enjoy. So,
Yeah,
all right, here. This this is another one of those visual like interacting with real life. Like that shot of the hands with the rocks, I think is just really
sure.
impressive.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's a real rock that he's obviously holding, and then they just
yeah,
paint his fingers out and put the
yeah,
ape hand in there,
yeah.
so it's pretty awesome. But even this case, like you watch this shot right here from what Owen actually did on the day, it's fantastic. It's like, he's bringing it, man. He's really acting. He's giving it all the emotion and heart that all the artists at Weta have to go in and just make sure that we're reading in this digital character's face. You know what I mean? So it really does start there with those actors, and then it's up to the artists to capture that magic, and reflect it back through these characters. It's a real team effort.
Yeah, you see it in the raw cut, especially. You see like that direct translation of the tears that he's producing, the expressions he's making, that real emotion that is
My
coming
favorite,
across
one of
his
my favorite
face.
shots right there. This one, this is like something about long lens wide shots that are just epic. You know what I mean? I just love that shot. This is another little sequence that actually changed pretty late in the game. Um, we had a version where we didn't go back to the tunnel, but we were trying to save time. But we had to make an argument for this thing that we needed to see this character go back to this and cross the threshold, essentially, to swallow that fear and to go into that dark place, not knowing where his journey will lead him. And this shot right here was kind of it was kind of created, you know, um, somewhat out of nothing. And yeah, it was just one of those cases where, like, a movie can change a lot in editing. It's kind of fantastic that that stuff can happen.
Oh, actually, this is a interesting question. Caitlin Davies, was Noah aware of other kinds of apes before setting off on his quest? I asked this because Raka was talking about gibbons at one point.
Mhm.
So was there a cut out part where Noah asked about other apes?
It's interesting. I think Noah's pretty young, and there is a spot where he talks about outsiders, right? So he's aware that there are outsiders, but I don't think he's ever seen an orangutan. I don't think he's ever seen other necessarily apes that are outside sort of his known tribe. He's just been sheltered his whole life. He's never really left. He stayed there in Eagle Clan. So this journey for him is very much kind of an eye-opening experience to kind of learn about things that he just never thought he would, including seeing, horses with stripes. You know what I mean? It's that kind of stuff.
That was something that was one of the funnier lines in the movie, the horse with stripes thing. That's actually something I'm kind of curious about. Like, what other animals are around? What have they seen? If you thought about that at all? Like in this part of the world, what has made its way over to California? What have they seen?
Yeah.
What do they
Well,
interact with?
I forgot which Apes movie from the past where all the dogs died, right?
Conquest, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, Conquest, yeah. So, maybe there's no dogs. There's obviously eagles. So I think a lot of animals that are kind of hardy animals that are used to surviving without uh, interference with humans are probably around, like the zebras that probably came from some old zoo. In my mind, it was Griffith Park. Um, elephants are probably around, and all that kind of stuff, especially the world where they can have a new kingdom to kind of traverse essentially. Um, but I think cattle are probably gone. They can't survive really without mankind. But yeah, it's a good question and it's something cool to think about.
Yeah. Um, oh, this. See, I love this bit. This kind of three-part little mini story within the movie. The
Yeah,
relationship between
yeah,
Noah and Eagle's son.
yeah. It was
I think
fun.
it really pays off in the end, especially.
Yeah, and it's kind of amazing. It's like literally three scenes with the eagle,
Yeah,
right? When we first meet him with his dad, here, on this
they
moment
hate
here.
each other. Yeah,
Yeah, and then the third one, he kinda chooses them, and that's kind of the 1, 2, 3, the magic 1, 2, 3 of any narrative, beginning, middle, and end, and it somehow still works, it just still works by the end there that this eagle, this kind of representation of the father spirit, in this bird is kind of it's the act of his father accepting his son, essentially by the end of the movie, you know what I mean? So, yeah, it's kinda cool, all these little thematic ideas that can kinda be layered in. on what is an already pretty dense movie. This is another one of my
Yeah.
favorite shots, by the way. It's just so I love it. It's great. It's so real. Considering that Ape's
Um,
not real. It's just amazing.
exactly. From KR, as far as the characters go, who changed the most from initial script? Did the actors give input on their characters' backgrounds or history, or is that now canon?
Hmm. I don't know. It's a good question. It all kind of blurs together, to be honest. It's such a fluid process from the very early conception all the way through. When I first came up with this idea of this egg climb, for instance, I knew it was going to be this Noah character. I didn't have a name, but I called him Curious George. Um, but I thought it was going to be his brother, his older brother, that was with him, kind of showing him the ropes on that climb. And that's how I pitched it to Josh. And then Josh said, "Nah, make it like three friends that are kind of his equals." And and then so that's a perfect example where it's just we kind of talk about how these things can go. But I don't know. All the actors definitely, absolutely bring something to the characters that weren't there before. I'd say Anaya probably surprises some to some degree. Um, his character wasn't quite as much there in the script as what you see in the movie, but he brought so much to it that it stands out. I think that's a really good example. But I think all the actors, they're the ones who really, like I said, they author these characters and they bring something to it that could never have been written. You know what I mean? That's kind of the fun of making movies is that it's all these layers of interpretation by talented artists. To create something that feels real. And tell a good story. So yeah. It's true. Noah does do a lot of falling in this movie. Josh, you're muted, by the way. You didn't know that.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, thank you. Um, this is a great intro to Raka, by the way.
Yeah, he was fun. It was fun. And this is like, Peter making just doing his thing, man. And that voice, it's like you don't have to do anything, It's just, he just got the voice. But yeah, it's a cool way to show the Caesar storyline that we all love and knew is almost dead. It's almost gone. You know what I mean? And if it weren't for Noah bumping into this character, that little spark, that little flame of the true Caesar could have died out, you know? And so I think it's gonna be awesome to watch Noah kind of carry that flame forward into the future, essentially. You know what I mean? And almost compete with this other version of Caesar that Proximus has. So yeah, it was a really fun thing to kind of set this idea that, I had this image in my head of I want to see a monastery of orangutans. There's a ton of them, all like preaching and practicing the words of Caesar. It was this awesome idea, and then it didn't make it in the movie, of course, but to find kind of the remnants of that through Raka, it was fun. It was really cool. And that's like a perfect example. That's an invention from Josh Friedman, our writer. I didn't come up with Raka as a character. He had him. We knew we had to have an orangutan in the movie. In fact, that was one of the things we had to worry about. It was like I cannot do another. I mean, Maurice is so great, in the previous movies. I can't have another ape orangutan with giant cheek pads. So we had to come up with a different look. We had to, otherwise it's just going to feel like we're just going to repeating ourselves. So again, it was like, how do we come up with another great orangutan character that doesn't feel like the other one, what I mean, the past one, So hopefully we've
You
done
did a
that.
great
We've made
job.
a character that
I
people
think you
like.
did.
Yeah.
He he serves a similar role as Maurice, but he's has a much different personality. He's much more
Yeah.
lively. Yeah, obviously
And
much
it was
more
obviously
evolved.
somewhat connected to Maurice. There's some lineage there, whether it's bloodline or not. That you can imagine that Maurice, after Caesar died, Maurice is probably the character went off and started to kind of writing. He learned how to write and read, through the friends that he made, and Dawn, I think, is where they showed that. And the fact that he would be the keeper of the true Caesar, and from there would become this order of Caesar, essentially, with these orangutans. It kind of makes sense. So there's probably like a whole other movie we could tell there of that storyline.
That's a great Disney Plus series there.
Yeah, that's right. By the way, this shot here, if talking about LAX, that is literally LAX, the International Terminal at LAX. That's what we modeled that off of. This little
Nice.
shot. So there you go for anyone who's really paying attention.
Yeah. Okay, another question here for you. Bookworm Dazzle. Since Dawn was inspired by Shakespeare's Hamlet, should we expect the sequel to have similar Shakespearean influences?
Mhm. It's a
That's a
good
good question.
question. Well, I mean, Shakespeare is kind of like, at the core of most drama and stories, right? So I think whether we wanted to or not, it'd probably still show up in there. But that's a good point. So it's tragedy and drama and comedy. It's all, it's all stuff that has survived the test of time, and I'm sure will make its way into future movies here.
Okay, here's another good one about
Oh
Raka.
yeah, those little
Uh,
those little glyphs in Raka's robe, by the way. I think
yep.
Andy mentioned. They're kind of loosely based off the glyphs that you see in the 1968 version with the
Really?
orangutans there. Yeah, so that's where that
Oh,
comes
that's
from.
awesome. That's really cool. I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
that's pretty cool that you actually noticed that, because like we that's one of
I
those
didn't
things
notice
that
it.
we just subtly put in. Where someone has to actually model all that and actually create the stitching, in CG to put it there. It doesn't happen by accident, so that's cool that you caught it. So
That's
nice
awesome.
work.
I'm actually curious. We might learn later tonight. What other little Easter eggs and little nods here and there you might have snuck in there? That's really cool. But speaking
Yeah.
of Raka, from Jesse, was Raka truly the last order of Caesar? Is May the new vessel of Caesar's legacy thanks to her bond with Noah and Raka?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. That's a really good question. I think for this movie, yes, he is. Again, the idea that, as far as Raka knows, that Caesar's flame is almost gone. It's almost dead. And then one day, fate sends him this chimpanzee falling through his ceiling, and because of that, the flame of Caesar will continue on. You know what I mean? So it's a really cool notion, I think. Um, but are there others out there? I'm sure there are. You know, so
Nice. Another one here from Ineffable. Proximus seems mistrustful of humans. Did Proximus learn about the virus and how humans used to keep apes in cages from Trevathan, or was it in lore passed down from the story of Caesar? That's
I think it's
also
a
a good
little bit of
question.
both. Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Obviously, Proximus as a character is aware of Caesar, who Caesar was, and that clan. It certainly has some roots in that first group of Caesar. Um, but what was lost in between there and then, who knows, right? But very much the idea is that Trevathan, this human character, has been giving him history and teaching him about things that he wouldn't have known otherwise, and that's what's caused him to advance so quickly, right? So yeah, that's all good stuff, I think.
Gotcha. That's
Perhaps
um
Caesar bids me travel. Yes, he thinks of, he again, he looks up. Remember that story I was telling you about where Raka would
yep.
tell the story about we look up to the sky and remember who he was. Um, uh, there's a real spiritual notion that we love that idea. And there's a lot more in the original script that Josh put in. This kind of apes and spirituality was starting to really kind of come together in this movie. But it had to kind of take a little bit of a backseat, but it's there and kind of subtext. But who knows what'll happen in the future movies. So
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see. Oh, here's another good question. Kind of answered this earlier, but Tater Chicken. Hey, Wes, what would the Statue of Liberty look like in this version of Planet of the Apes universe? The same as the '68 film?
mhm. I almost don't want to give it away, but I would say no. And it would be fun to see how it ends up like the 68 version. But again, I don't know. It's I am right now at least not the keeper of the future of the franchise. You know what I mean? So I want to be as involved as I can, but I also, you know, I have another movie I'm working on right now. So whether everyone will wait for that or whether they need me or not, it's kind of not. It's not my franchise, right? I was just a lucky visitor in this franchise for this movie, at least at the moment.
Gotcha. All good. Well, we're all eagerly hoping to find out more about that kind of stuff sooner rather than later. The Statue of Liberty is like, I know it's like iconic, but I'm more interested in just seeing what the like other parts of the world, not just the country, but what other parts of the world look like. So that's something
Sure.
I'm really interested in.
Yeah.
This part right here, where we introduce the singing, I thought that was
Uh-huh.
so. It was unexpected, and I will admit, when we got to the end of the movie and we see Noah start singing on that cliff, I got a little nervous for a second. Like, what are we doing here? But then you get the whole scene, and it really pays when everyone joins in, and it really pays off. So I thought the singing aspect wasn't sure where you were going with it at first, but I thought it really worked.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and you hear Koro singing when we first meet
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a
Next
great little simple
question.
scene too. This one, where we're just the cameras aren't doing anything special. This is like a scene where, like, if you look at my previous movies, the cameras are always moving. They're always doing. I can't be just still. But in this scene, it's just like, let's just be camera stay still, and like there's a real power in that. You know what I mean? So that was a fun learning experience for me.
Uh, got a fun little question for you here. It's actually something I've always noticed. You have that iconic hat of yours at this point. Wes, where did you get that Capilano suspension bridge
Oh,
hat? I can't find it or buy it online.
I know. I go through hats for every movie. Like, I used to have one movie in all the major movies, and I'm one hat in all the major movies, and it just the element destroyed the thing, and it's in tatters. I still have it, but then I just kind of like I'd look at my pile of hats, and I was like, yeah, I'll wear this one, and it just kind of ends up becoming the hat I sort of wear. Um, I got it when I was doing the third Maze Runner movie, Death Cure. We were in Vancouver for a couple months before we tragically had a little accident that kind of shut us down. But the Capilano of the Bridge world there is awesome, and I just found this hat and I liked it, so I took it and I wear it occasionally. I have another hat too, but it's just I don't know. I guess because I
Uh,
grew up on Indiana Jones, I just feel like the hat is the extension of the character. I just I don't know. I just always wear a hat, no reason.
there you go. Um, little super chat here from Kareem Harper. Thank you. Thank you, Wes Ball. Bring on more.
I
Let's
will
see
do
here.
my best.
Let's see here. Oh, this is one of my favorite lines in the movie. We call them all Nova. We don't know why. It's from Caesar's time. Let's see here.
We do not know is from Caesar's
Yeah,
time. By the way, that line always gets a freaking laugh. I never
yeah,
understood why, but it always gets a laugh.
yeah.
I think it's just because
I
like the acknowledgement of the previous movies and our knowledge of them. I think it just makes
yeah,
people kind of
yeah,
smile, and that tells me
yeah.
that
It's
they're with the
perfect.
movie. By the way,
Yeah.
so that's good.
Um. Oh, here's a good, interesting question. Sharky 700. I don't know if anyone has asked this, but to Mr. West, what are your thoughts on a Planet of the Apes What If series?
Yeah, that'd be cool, man. I'd be down for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, do it. I think it's a good idea. I do not know why. That's right. You're right.
um. Okay, here's another one. I don't know if you have any answers to this one, but from Ineffable, could Disney be putting out any more Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes merch?
Hell yeah. Again, I don't have any say in that stuff, but yeah, they could do a lot more. I have some really cool stuff here. I'll show you guys actually. Give me 1 second. I have so much merch from the different, all the departments. They'll do these awesome like, things on and rap. Look at that guy, baby. Tell me that's not cool.
That's
So
awesome.
anyway, this is my effects kind of shirt, but I have so many of that stuff, and like the stunt team has a really great shirt, and everyone kind of makes. They had a lot of fun. We have a ton of that stuff, but maybe I'll have to dig it up one of these days and hand them out to people because I have a lot of it. Cool merch.
I love the design on it. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a cool one.
This is another one of the scenes that I think got a lot of people talking with the telescope.
Huh?
Um, and I'm curious. I don't know if you'll be able to tell me. Maybe it's something that'll be revealed. But do you know what Noah's looking at that we don't see?
Yes, but I cut it out, and Josh, the writer, hates me for it. But that's just the way it goes, baby. Um, I don't want to know what he saw. I want to imagine what he saw, and I think, that's better that way, but I understand the frustration for some people.
I
By the
think
way, this scene, I almost cut it. I was
really.
not sure I wanted to do this scene because I have to admit, I was like, "This is ridiculous. A telescope pointing up in the sky and the optics still work? It doesn't make sense. We can't do this scene," so I fought this scene a lot. And Josh really loved it, and actually the studio really loved it. Steve Aswell, he loves this little scene. And I love the vibe of it. I understood the reason for it, but I had like other things that we could try. But ultimately, I said, okay, fine, guys. I was kind of ruled out. I said, I will shoot this thing, and then we'll see. You know what I mean? And so I shot it, and then I put it in the movie, And even in its raw form, I was like, well, maybe audience will just go with it because it is a cool scene, and it's one of those cases where my favorite stuff usually in the movie is when there's no dialogue. Not to say anything bad about our dialogue scenes, but like I just love visual storytelling where like there's nothing is said here, but everything is said here just through shots, performance. I just really appreciate that when a movie can pull that off. But it was a hell of a set to build and for visual effects to actually create because like half the set is CG. But yeah, it's a great little scene, and I understand why people like it.
Yeah, I actually love that you don't show what we see because
Yeah,
of what happens after when he uh explains that she reacted the way that we did. Like you don't need to
he
see what they
sees his
saw. That's all you
future.
need, you
He
know?
sees his future. He sees an idea for an animal to understand that there's a world that's bigger than himself. That's a big idea. And we used to have this scene where he talks about dreams, and he didn't know what they were. And there's something interesting where it's like, yeah, dogs dream. We see them running in their sleeps and stuff, but dogs don't sit there and contemplate their dreams. That's a very human thing. And so I love that concept of like you're seeing these apes are like us, and that scene is very much about that. It's an ape saying that a human is like an ape. It's that's the fun of that scene. I think to some degree, it's like these two characters, two creatures, are seeing themselves in each other. You know what I mean? So that's cool.
Well, speaking of you almost deleting that scene, got a question from Emma Shepard. Okay, Wes Ball, I have one question. Why are there so many golden deleted scenes that were tossed, and are we ever going to see an extended edition with those
Oh man,
completed scenes put back in?
I would love for it. At the very end, I was fighting like crazy. I mean, the studio was hating me because I was like, "We gotta put this back in," And we had some shots that are done, they're finished. You know what I mean? We actually made sure that we had to finish the shots because I would like to see it go back in. But in all fairness, the runtime was pretty fat, man. It's a 2 hour and I think 17 or 16 minutes runtime without credits. And of course, because we have so many credits, it's like 10 minutes of credits. And so anytime you get to a movie that's 2.5 hours, the studio freaks out, no matter what. You know what I mean? And the movie has a certain kind of a pace. It just does. And we can only do so much to speed that stuff up. Maybe in hindsight, I would work a little harder to kind of make the pace go a little faster, but it's the kind of movie that it is. It's this road movie where we meditate on ideas, and that's the thing that makes Apes movies special to me, is that we're not racing through to the next kind of action scene. This isn't really even an action movie, really, but even though we're coming off of one that's kind of an action scene, it's a movie that's about ideas and about performances and this kind of mesmerizing kind of idea of intelligent apes. And so, you know, it is what it is, but the compromise there is I had to cut some stuff. You know what I mean? I had to kind of lose some things. And some of those scenes are freaking great. There's one in particular where Noah has a dream of Koro and fire. That's freaking awesome. I love that shot. It's one shot, and it's just he comes out of the kind of ether. I'm gonna find that shot. I'm gonna post it somewhere. But uh, it happened right before he woke up and met his eagle son, and it scratches him on the arm when he's on his journey. It was just this great mythic idea that Noah is dreaming about his father, and his father tells him to sing. You know what I mean? And this is what that means. And he wakes up, and there's a bird looking at him, his father's bird staring at him. You know what I mean? And it's so mythic. And that was my last fight where I tried to get that freaking thing in there. And let's just say Steve Asbell said, please, please don't. He just begged me, not to put it in. And so I gave in. It was one of my weaker moments, guys. I'm sorry, but we just couldn't add that extra 30 minutes. But it is what it is. That's the way that these movies go usually. But I would love to see another version, extended version of the movie where we put some of those scenes back in. Like there's a great scene with Suna in a hammock, which is really sweet. And the relationship between him and her and Noah. There's lots of great little things all over the place. But yeah, yeah.
I saw someone posted release the ball cut in the chat there.
No, this is the ball cut, but you always have those things. Even having Mason or two, where it's like, God damn it, why did I cut that? You know what I mean? It's just a problem that I'm constantly having, where it's just my moves are too damn long. So I gotta work on that a little bit. I'll be on the next one where I'll be a little quicker with things. But
Okay, here. I'll pull this one up. Cameron Stewart just sends $20 of support. Thank you so much, Cameron. Appreciate it. And my friend
that's
Andy,
cool.
who I know,
I
and
didn't know
I'm
about. Well, I don't know about the dollar thing. That's cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What's the
It's a
dollar thing?
thing. It's just you can. That's I told people like if you want to guarantee, because I obviously I can't get to every single question I hear because there's it's
I see.
hundreds in
Well,
here.
that's cool.
So if you want to guarantee it, you can send one of those in. But my buddy Andy, I'm glad showed up here. Was there any idea about dealing with characters within the original mythology, such as the lawgiver or the original Aldo?
Good questions. Good questions. They're on our minds, let's say. But we see Raka in there. It does say he is our law giver. He brings it up. But I don't want to say anything more because who knows? You know what I mean? It's certainly something we had talked about a lot. So, we'll see what happens with moves 2 and 3.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'm
Yeah.
actually going off of that. Was there ever plans? Because I know obviously pretty much everyone in here is wholly original characters. Nova is obviously a reference to the original Nova.
Uh-huh.
But was there ever any intention on maybe incorporating a new version of like a Zero or, you know, some of these other characters throughout the franchise here and there? Or did you really just
Yeah.
want to focus on making it its own thing?
Yeah. But those archetypes are in the movie, right? But those characters themselves are not. And I think they never would be. In my perfect world, you'd have these three movies that would basically bring us up to um the 68 version, basically. I wouldn't want to kind of overlap, you know what I mean? I don't see the need to do anything like that. I think there's enough great story potential to just see the the trajectory and over there, right? So um that's my thinking. But again, I am not the keeper of the franchise. It's not mine to decide necessarily.
This scene is another one of my favorites. Obviously, a not even subtle, direct
That's right.
homage to the
Yeah.
original movie. But it's one of those things where it's just awesome to see something that I grew up loving in an old movie from 1968 presented through a 2024 lens. It's just really
Yeah,
cool.
totally. That was the fun of it, right? It was the fun of it. It's like, yeah, look, we're into that world now, you know what I mean? And again, setting up putting this little piece on the table of like the feral humans that can be explored in next movies, I think will be really important.
Um, let's see here. Oh, here's a good one. Tater Chicken. What's the significance of Fort Wayne, Indiana? I know the answer to that one.
Yeah, there are some answers. I'll let you answer, but I actually pushed for I wanted there was a military base in New York that I wanted, but I was overruled. But we ended up with
Oh,
this one.
okay. Yeah, Fort Wayne, Indiana is where Taylor from the original movie went to school. So there you go. Great little nod there, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, here's one I'm actually curious about. KR, how old are Noah and May supposed to be?
Good question. Um, let's just say some anywhere from like 17 to 22 or 23, right? They're the kind of classic on the no longer a kid, but not yet an adult kind of thing. You know what I mean? And I don't want to say young adult because this doesn't quite feel appropriate, but they're at that place in their life where they're going to be hitting forks in the road of who they are as people, and and they are going to make choices that are going to decide who they ultimately kind of become. You know what I mean? As people, as adults, and so they're in that zone, I'd say.
Here's a question about the raw cut, which I'm curious. I mean, you kind of answered a little bit earlier, but I'm a fan of the raw cut from Lil Do. Do you think 20th Century will do this for future Planet of the Apes movies, or was it too difficult to produce?
Um, Good question, man. I don't know. I'd love to see it happen. It only I'm not sure how interesting it would be for a movie that doesn't have. I mean, we only have 30 non-VFX shots in the movie, right? There's 30. So every shot you're getting a little making of, essentially. I don't know that that would work for a movie that has, say, 1,000 VFX shots or something. You know what I mean? So it's a good question. Um, I did the same thing on Maze Runner, where I did just select sequences where you have the top and bottom version, where you can really see, for instance, our train thing in Death Cure is a really good example of like, oh wow, that's a lot of CG, but you don't know it. So uh, I think some people don't like to show the tricks a little bit, which I can appreciate. But I like for people that care about that stuff, I miss the DVDs that I used to watch, like from Lord of the Rings. or it's like 10 hours or something of just behind the scenes and making of stuff. And I would watch that stuff endlessly while I was in film school and high school. And that was my film school. That was like how I learned about making movies and stuff. So like I am sad that that era is kind of behind us a bit. So I'd love to see that stuff come back, in
Yeah,
some way, you know.
I totally agree. I don't know if you know about these, but Robert Rodriguez, he used to do these things like I think they were called like 10-minute
Yeah,
film schools. I used to
yeah,
I obsessed watching those as a kid. So I'd love to see more stuff like the Raka and that come back.
yeah,
Speak.
absolutely, man. They were great.
So this scene right here, I got a question. I'm assuming I know the answer, but May yelling, speaking for the first time. Obviously, the way it plays in the movie plays like something that's supposed to be a big reveal, a surprise. Unfortunately, it was released and revealed in the trailer when the movie
Yeah,
came
which
out.
for me was
Was
a
that?
was a real I was very upset with the marketing
Yeah.
team for doing it. I fought really hard to not do it. They heard me, they listened to me, of course, but they felt it was very important to do it. I lost that battle because that's just unfortunate. I don't have that power to demand not to reveal it. But I do think it really changes your viewing of the movie. If you had seen that and know she speaks, it really changes your whole vibe when she shows up in the movie, knowing that she speaks. So I think it actually slows the movie down for people, actually, in the middle when this character shows up and we're just waiting for when she's gonna talk. I know she talks. So that's the thing, but I'm not the only director ever to have, you know, issues with the marketing plans of movies. But with that said, I will say they were fantastic people to work with. They're really good at what they do. All my marketing people on this movie, and we had a great time together. It was just this one sticky point is what it kind of. I still regret it, frankly, but whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah, the movie still turned out great, and the scene I
Yeah.
still think plays well. There's a couple. My parents saw it. They don't watch trailers at all. So when they saw it, it was still a big
Hmm.
surprise for them. So I think
Gotcha.
for a lot of people, it still played well. Um,
Originally, I had a much bigger scene there
yeah,
that involved ancient ancient freeways. Basically, it was a chase that kind of ended up on these ancient, freeway systems like spaghetti, of stuff that was overgrown and collapsing, and that was where May ultimately kind of spoke to save Noah, the opposite way, basically. And it was cool, but it was like $15 million that we didn't have in our budget. I had to cut it, and we ended up with the smaller, simpler version. But we had a bunch of
um,
artwork for it and a bunch of previews generated for it. It was freaking rad. But that's the way movies
uh,
go.
so here's a question I'm curious about from Ethan Doyle. Did you use any of your work on the Maze Runner trilogy as inspiration for Kingdom?
Not really. Um, it's certainly, even my short Ruin, if you go look up Wes Ball Ruin, you'll see that even before Maze Runner, I've been playing around with post-apocalyptic kind of landscapes. And so, if anything, you can say I stole from that one, But Maze Runner, yeah, there's only so many different looks you can have for like kind of a overgrown post-apocalyptic world. Whereas Maze Runner was more desert oriented, I guess, and more destroyed, And obviously, I didn't come up with that. That was kind of based on the book. But even here, it's not like I chose to do this story because of the post-apocalyptic thing. It was like it was just a necessary aspect of the movie. Um, but I will say I probably relied more on my Ruins short experience than I did the Maze Runner stuff for visuals. If anyone's seen that the Ruins short, you'll see it. It's like a guy on a bike racing through a overgrown civilization streets
It's
and
really good.
buildings and stuff.
It's really
So
fun.
yeah,
It's really cool.
you'll
Um,
see the comparisons there.
this scene between where we kind of start learning a bit about May, I'm curious, do you like I don't know, you plan you the intention is eventually to reveal more about where she came from, but do you know like what happened to her, where she really came from, like how she was raised and, brought into this world?
Oh yeah, we've talked a lot about it, but I think that again, I don't want to give away anything that might be explored in future movies. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah, yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there, and hopefully there's enough here to kind of pique people's interest. To learn more. You know,
Gotcha. Um
the scar on May's arm. I keep getting that question. It was just to show that she's went through some junk, and if people that were paying attention, they'd see that it was healed and that it was fixed, and it might tell you that she's not a feral human. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
There
So
was a
another
tear running
question we
down her
had.
face, an uncut version. There's a tear running down her face. Why was that cut edited out? Oh, I know what you're talking about. Um, there were several scenes in the movie where May cries, and it was just getting to be too much. And so we just picked ones here and there where I just like it's too much. Let's just get rid of it, essentially. So that's the case where sometimes you'll hear about tears being painted in. This is where we actually had painted them out because like Freya is so good. She knows how to just she turns it on. She knows how to like just make it go. You know what I mean? She's really really incredible that way. Um, but we just had to when you put the movie all together, you start to see like oh yeah, we're just doing this too much. It feels like you're just kind of singing the same note over and over again. And so we just tried to balance that out, do it appropriately.
Now, this stuff all here with the water. I mean, there's a lot of water more towards the end of the movie too, but I remember you saying that all the water in this, like everything is CGI when it comes to the water. Like
Yeah, so
every
right now
single.
they're in a parking lot right now. We're shooting
That's
this. They're in a
insane.
parking lot.
That's
Yeah,
incredible.
there's no
Like,
background. That's blue screen all around them. We built a little like 30-foot chunk of bridge basically, and it's just extended on and on. And so all that water back there that you see moving around, there was a plate that we shot that had a river in it, but it didn't have any running river or running water like this. So that's all Weta, simulating water essentially. Like all that's all CG water. You look at the plate, you'll be blown. Your mind will be blown. Like again, I'm biased, but they should have won the VFX Oscar this year. It's just the amount of work here is just on a completely different level. Even though it's not giant sandworms and stuff, and that movie is fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but the amount of work that was achieved on this thing by these artists is just it's invisible. And I think that stuff is a lot of times harder to do. But whatever. I'm biased, of course.
you know what? I agree with you. I do. I think it should have won. I love Dune, but this just visually, what you guys did here and what Weta did, especially with these water scenes, is I have never. I mean, it's the top of the game. It's some of the
Yeah, yeah.
best that
Water
I've
is
ever
the hardest
seen
thing to do. Yeah, it's the hardest thing to do, and we were scared about it, but Weta and Eric and his team at Weta, they got it to work, man.
for sure, for sure. Another question, actually, speaking of Weta, from Ineffable, did Weta get any input from you and the concept artist on how the apes would look? Noah's face looks 60% human and 40% chimp.
Yeah, we spend most of our time talking about that. And a lot of it's like you want the actors' faces to be in there. If you look at actually Caesar and Andy, the eye line, the bridge on the eye, and all these little subtle details are all very, very similar. It helps us all kind of to see, are we getting the animation right? Are we getting the performance right? And so you just find that sweet spot, where hopefully you buy it, you know what I mean? Um, and you relate to it. And Noah's the trickiest one, right? Because for audiences that aren't really familiar with these movies or are coming to them for the first time, um, there is a line where eventually an audience member will um, disengage when it's too much. I'll say an eight. They kind of just they don't like it. Um, and obviously, we don't have to appeal to everyone, but we have to. The size of these movies, the expense of these movies, we have to try to appeal as many people as possible. It needs to bring in a certain amount of money, so we have to find that sweet spot where how do we make it look like an eight? You say, oh, you look at him, he looks at an eight, but also there's something human in him that I can relate to and kind of invest my emotions in, for the movie experience. You know what I mean? And then the other part of it is just getting Owen's face, his actual face kind of characteristics in there as well. So it's just kind of it's a process that we all spend a long time going through. But yeah.
Now, that's this moment right where we just lost Raka. That was I think it's a point of contention for a lot of people where they, whether or not Raka's going to come back or not. And it's such a great scene, a great character moment for Noah. But I was curious, was there ever a point where, because the way it read to me was like, oh, he's going to come back in the third act and help Noah take on
I think
Proximus.
most movies, yeah, you do that, but that
Yeah,
would feel
what
so
did
cheap if we did it. I thought,
you
so
didn't you
we
didn't
didn't.
think so? There was never a point where that was even considered.
No, because you
Hmm.
you gotta like sometimes you gotta like do the thing that isn't um that sometimes the happy endings aren't there for your characters. You know what I mean? And it makes it stronger in a way. But Again, who knows what'll happen in the future? You never know, you know. But I don't know. If we had like Raka riding in to save the day at the end of the movie, it's like suddenly I think we would have ventured into a very different kind of movie. You know what I mean? And not a Planet of the Apes movie. So that's how we kind of thought of it.
Gotcha. This is one of my favorite shots in the movie. This
Oh, I
just
love all
seeing
this
the
stuff. Yeah,
ship. It's
this is our
awesome.
very
It's
first scene
epic.
that we shot, basically. Out on
Really.
the waterway. Yeah, it was awesome. It was the very first thing. It was like we shot
This
the
one
shots,
too.
and it was like
Yeah.
it just felt like it. That's actually a shot that I came up with after the fact, actually. But
Really.
we happened to shoot a little shot looking down of May, and then we put in all the. Of course, this is one of the cases where you want to watch the raw cut to see just how much stuff is being done to these shots here, to make it feel real. But yeah.
All right, we got a question from Jesse. What led you to bring May into the picture as the franchise's first human female co-protagonist? Did you always have Freya in mind for the role?
Not Freya, no. We found Freya. You know what I mean? In fact, when we had a couple auditions with a couple different girls that were all very, very good. And Freya was on Zoom for her audition, where the other girls were in the room. And and man, even to the Zoom, we're like, something's coming through there. That's kind of amazing. And so we had to go through this incredibly arduous task of like, she had to finish up this thing she was working on and fly out across the world to Australia to do a day of an audition on tape with Owen, and then fly back home. And this was like a couple of weeks before we had to shoot or something, right? um so it was a really kind of crazy time where we had to make this choice of who was going to be May. But yeah, Freya did a great job. I think we got the right person for what we needed. You know what I mean? She's really talented
Yeah.
and young, and has a look that feels like it fits somehow. Like it feels like she belongs in the Planet of the Apes movie to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, she
So.
has that almost timeless look. Like she could be in that era. It just works. I think she did a great job. Um,
Mhm.
Question from Richard McCauley, three parts. Have you considered Planet of the Apes Caesar story? That could be a metaphorical Rosetta Stone. Is that book still out there in the world? Could it be found in future movies?
It's like the sacred scrolls that were talked about in the 68 movie. But like I said, I don't want to give anything that will spoil anything, but a lot of this stuff was talked about. Let's say we discussed. So who knows?
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that's something I'm curious about too. Just how much of Caesar's world and what he did is actually still out there to be discovered. Or how much is
Yeah.
completely eroded away.
I don't know. How much of Caesar's world was there? There wasn't much. They had like a bunch of logs piled up together, or you know what I mean? Like that stuff's not going to survive. What survives are the stories, right? The stories are what outlive um, the man or the ape in this case, right? So, and the symbols, right? And I think that's what you left with at the end of the movie. He's holding the symbol of Caesar and these stories that Raka told him, and that'll have to guide him forward. You know what I mean? Noah as a character. So.
Next question from Richard McCauley. Hypothetically, let's say a fan was interested in auditioning as an ape extra. Where would one find the arm braces that the actors used when filming
Mm,
Apes Together Strong?
that's a good question. I actually don't know. I actually don't know. They have really fancy ones, really expensive ones that I think you can buy. We didn't use those. We used the really cheap ones. Because I guess Owen, we really liked them. I mean, he was walking around them everywhere. But I do think you can get them. I just don't know where. Sorry. But I know they're out there. So, oh yeah, someone says Terry Notary sells them. Yeah, so maybe that's where you get them from.
There you go. Um, all right. So from Chilton, the other three movies are inspired by Moses' story in the Bible. Did Wes say what his trilogy will be about? I got here late. Did he answer that? Okay.
I
No, he
love
did
it's the
not.
Moses story in the Bible, but yes, Rick Commanded pitched the original Caesar story as a story of Pinocchio to Moses. That's what they pitched. And that's very much kind of what you see in the first Rise movie too, right? But then it's even taken into a bigger point through Dawn and War. But yeah, let's just say that we discussed a lot about where the story could ultimately go, and that how this movie needed to really kind of exist in its own on its own, kind of stand on its own 2 feet, but we see it very much as the beginnings of a large story, essentially, with Noah in particular. So, um, yeah, we'll see. I don't want to give away too much, and plus,
Yeah.
like I said, this isn't my franchise anymore. So, um, someone might come in and change it all completely. Who knows? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Um, all this stuff, I think, is something I'm curious about. When you initially get to the kingdom, you're expecting to see like apes and slaves, apes and chains, Proximus
Mhm.
dominating. But when you get there, it's like they're kind of all just
Yeah,
living not
just like
harmoniously,
a
but
just like a
they're having a
real ape
community.
colony, like a
Yeah,
real ape colony. Like when
yeah,
you have these ape wars, you know, you have one little violent act where you take out the alpha essentially, and then all the other apes they fold in. That's their instinct. You know what I mean? So that's what's kind of fun about designing this world is that it's sort of human like. It's like inspired by these Roman kind of ideas of conquering and all this kind of stuff that Proximus has been, you know, being taught and learning about. But they're still apes in their DNA. They still have the instincts of like an ape, you know, animal kingdom essentially. So it was fun to kind of blend those realities. You know what I mean? It was cool.
yeah. This and then this upcoming scene where we get Proximus's intro. This is another one of my favorite moments with the the banging on the drums and all the theatrics of it. I really love that you just created a character who is so in love with himself.
Yeah, sure.
And I think Kevin Durant did such a great job at playing that up.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah, he had fun. He got to sink his teeth into him and
oh
just
yeah.
really he couldn't go more over the top essentially with his character. It just works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Was
it was fun.
was that always kind of the idea for the character? Was he ever more of like a darker kind of
No,
villain, or was
we
he ever
we always
always this
taught
type?
we always just explained him as Tony Robbins as an ape. So, he's this soothsayer. He's this charismatic kind of pitch man. You know, he's also incredibly smart, you know, and and everything he says in the movie is basically kind of true in a weird way. So it just goes about it in the wrong way. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah. Kevin is a fantastic. He's a fantastic find for this, and
He's great. He's
even his audition, it was like, oh yeah, that's it, that's him. you know,
um
so it's
I'm
cool.
curious. Obviously, the like you said, the movie's already almost 2.5 hours long, so you can't really add much more. You have to cut stuff out. But what even on the page, was there ever more of Proximus, or did he ever come into the story earlier, or was this
No,
always more or less
yeah,
how it was going to
it's
happen?
always there. Yeah, if you always look at the structure, it's like it's Eagle Clan, it's Noah on the road, and Raka, and then it's about halfway in. We're a little bit past halfway mark, but when he's walking up to the ship, it's about halfway through the movie, and so we said, okay, he's in Proximus Land for the last half of the movie, essentially, right? And so that's what it is. Unfortunately, maybe we could have made this a 3-hour movie and just really really gone for everything, but we tried to make a 2-hour movie, and ended up being somewhere in between, 2.5-hour movie. So.
Yeah. Watching it now, I don't know how there's any way you could have gotten this to even close to
No,
two
it's
hours.
impossible. Yeah, but
Yeah.
someone mentioned there that the anthropological aspect of these movies, that's what we thought about a lot. It's like you're seeing these different cultures that are forming, and they're making choices and rituals and belief systems, and manipulations and symbology, and it's so fun to play in that space of an emerging intelligent civilization, essentially. You know what I mean? Where you didn't really get to have that in the previous Apes movies with the Caesar and stuff. They're very much about survival and living kind of this a simple existence, essentially hiding in caves or whatever it is. Like again, like Stone Age era stuff. But to get into this place where not only they're going into the Bronze Age, but they already have all this lost knowledge and stuff that can be rediscovered. You know what I mean? How quickly we as humans would have actually advanced if we had sort of metal already laying around, or manuals for antibiotics or something. It's like it's really fun to think about where ultimately this ape kind of kingdom, that ape world, can actually go in the future movies. I think it's really inspiring. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Um, So I got another question for you here from my buddy Andy. I know
You're
Karen
right.
Knoble
Gorillas
came.
always get the crappy end of the stick, but don't worry. I have ideas for how to fix that. So just bear with us. I have
You're gonna
a
give
really
us a good
great
guy.
idea for it.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
gonna
I
give
have
us
a
a good
great
guy,
idea
Gorilla.
for one. Yeah.
Um, I know Karen Knoble came back for Maurice, but was Terry Notary ever contacted to come back as Rocket or to content on as the moving coach?
So I had spoken with Terry several times actually, early on, because I wanted to pick his brain on what to expect with these kind of movies and stuff. And so, I had talked to Terry quite a lot. Ultimately, we couldn't get the kind of deal and schedule time frame thing to work. It just wasn't going to work, and so we had to kind of just go a different way, essentially. But Terry's a great guy, and he kind of gave me um, a lot of great things to kind of keep in mind as we kind of moved forward and figured out how to kind of go forward. Yeah, yeah, it just didn't quite work on this one. But he's a good, cool, good guy.
Yeah, I loved. He's you know up just like Andy Serkis, he's a mocap king. So um, this introduction to Trevathan I thought was really interesting. What was he always the only other human you were going to have there? Was it just going to be one guy, or was there going to be multiple, or was there ever a point where he wasn't there at all?
No, we always said we wanted another human there because it was the first little sign that not. I mean, there's what's happening in the movie is this unraveling of what you thought about May, right? Oh, she's not feral. Oh, she can speak. She has a story. Oh, there's other humans that can speak too. Oh, the picture I had in my mind in the beginning is not what I expected. And then ultimately, at the end of the movie, we turn everything on its head and we realize, oh, this is just the beginning of apes and humans and where we can ultimately go. So that's what ultimately this is about. But also there are places for these characters, these types that see the writing on the wall that humans are not going to make it. And he's right, by the way. You know, so the best thing to do is to help
Join him.
them
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
can
yeah,
help
yeah.
myself. Essentially, wake up, kid. It's the cynical kind of thing. That was the right kind of story point to kind of have this moment in the story. You know what I mean? Especially for May. He had many different versions, I guess, of different scenes that kind of got changed out for just got edited out in the script phase. But yeah, he was always this type of character. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Was there ever like do you know more about him, like how he got there, how he met up with Proximus? Like we obviously there's the general like he found me, but was there ever did you I know you talk about like backstory and figuring out the characters even if we never hear about it. Was that the case for Trevathan as well?
Yeah, yeah. It was just like a long kind of backstory for all that kind of stuff. But I had this other backstory that didn't make it in, and it doesn't fit. But I thought was kind of interesting. Was that he was a character that came from May's silo like 10 years earlier, and he left to go find this place. Like you know, with what information they had, and he never came back. Disappeared. And so that when May would show up in this place and he would find him in league with these apes, and he doesn't know her because there's a bunch of them, but she knew him because she was taught the stories of this guy that went out there and never came back and died for the to look for the future of humanity. And here he is, just eating grapes with the apes. It would have been this great kind of dramatic turn on her. But for whatever reason, we didn't kind of like that and went a different way with it. But yeah, again, it tells that story that there are other humans out there that have their own stories and the other clans, tribes, whatever. Yeah, some people like that idea. Me too. I liked it. It was cool. I thought it was cool too. And the fact that she had to like kind of kill her her a person she looked up to, you know, I thought that was interesting. But anyway, whatever. Again, these are all ideas that just, for whatever reason, don't make it. They make candles. They can find them. They found it in a storage bunker somewhere. They found like a giant uh, overseas shipment container of candles. That's where they got the candles from. Who made Proximus the throne? I think Proximus made it himself, and I think what you get from Proximus is he's using these ideas not because he wants them, but they're symbols because he's learned that that's what humans did long ago in their kind of Roman history and all the different type of history that he's been studying. He's learned what it takes to kind of inspire the masses. And these gestures of thrones and symbols and standing on soapboxes and preaching, you know, that's like a key idea that I think that we're seeing there. He's learning how to be smart and be a politician. You know what I mean? The red on the forehead symbolized. It was just a cool idea. I like the red flags and stuff, and I thought there was something interesting about, one of the artworks. I had this thing where they'd paint this line down the nose, which is obviously somewhat similar to what you see in Dawn. But they had this kind of red sort of triangle down the thing. I thought there was some interesting little parallels there that maybe that you'd see maybe the beginnings, between where the red thing ended up and where it began. But yeah, this scene was a great scene for Proximus and kind of the dynamic between all the different characters. These scenes are notoriously really difficult with uh with doing dinner scenes, dinner table scenes. They're like for directors and crews are really difficult typically. But this one actually went very smoothly. I was surprised. It's a lot of coverage and a lot of cameras, and lots of performance stuff. But again, it's that case where Kevin in particular just got to eat this stuff up, and just have a good time with it. But yeah, it was fun.
I think the whole dinner scene, it's one of my favorite parts of the entire movie. Just mainly just because it's the first, just not the
Yeah, you get to
first, but
meet him and
yeah,
learn about him. Yeah.
it's the first point at this point in the movie where we just get all these characters,
But also,
May,
again, I
Noah,
think it's
Proximus interacting.
yeah, and I think what's interesting too about the characters, like you see him as this politician and this kind of big, almost scary figure, kind of inspiring the masses. But then you come in here and you start to understand the guy. He's got a point, you know what I mean? So it kind of puts you on your heels a little bit as an audience member that we're not going in the way that you typically expect. You know what I mean? He's not this mustache twirling bad guy that's gonna like, threaten Noah necessarily. He doesn't need to threaten him. He looks threatening already. So it's just a good little scene that kind of like I think, you know, goes against expectations a little bit. You know what I mean? But also just a kind of fun scene.
Um, Here's an interesting question that I hadn't really thought much about, but from KR, Noah's eyes are Owen's. What made you decide to give Anaya and Suna brown eyes instead of keeping Lydia and Travis's?
Yeah, it was just a look thing, frankly. But we actually experimented with different colors on all the apes, actually, those three apes. And if you see Lydia, she's got these gorgeous eyes. And there was something that went too human on Suna's character. And man, we on Suna's character, her design, we spent uh, so many iterations trying to find an appealing ape female face, which is incredibly difficult because typically female ape faces you can't tell if you're not like um a zoologist or something, you can't tell between difference really between an ape and a female face, a male ape face and a female ape face. It's just, they're too similar, and not only that, but a lot of times they're not very appealing. It's hard to kind of it's hard to make them pretty. And what do? You don't put lipstick on them. You can't give them like long eyelashes. It's like you have to find like this subtle way to make them feel cute or appealing somehow. And that was an incredible journey to get there. And ultimately, I think we got to a great place with Suna's character. I think she's a really, dare I say, pretty ape. Of course, Lydia as the actress who plays Suna is gorgeous, but but I think we found a good place there, with that design. But the eyes was just it was too intense somehow. So we kind of
Yeah.
brought them back down to something that's a little bit more real.
I mean, they did kind of a similar thing with the old movies. Like, you can clear as day see Andy Serkis's eyes in Caesar, but the same can't be said for a lot of those other apes. So I think it's something that should be done with certain apes and certain characters.
Yeah. And what's interesting is about, Proximus here, it's kind of the first time we actually gave him the ape eyes,
Yeah.
where like, there's like these dark scleras and stuff. So that was really fun. That was a cool discovery to make. And we played with all of the different versions, but these were very ape-like, essentially eyes here. And it's something that got kind of the apes teams all learned early on is that if you give them real ape eyes, you kind of there creates a distance there between the humanity a bit. And so that's why they ended up in those earlier movies giving them more kind of human kind of eye structures because it just helps you relate to these characters more. But we experimented on all fronts, trying to get them right. But there's that saying that eyes are the window to the soul, and the eyes are really, really important to get right on these characters for you to feel real. It's where a lot of the work goes into.
Gotcha. Um, all right, here's an interesting question. It actually kind of ties into some of the stuff going on right now. But from Bookworm Dazzle, is the Master of Birds the leader of the clan, or is the role more like that of a priest or like a religious figure?
Yeah, he's not the leader. They have leaders. They have elders up top, that do stuff. But yeah, the Master of Birds is, you could call it more religious or spiritual in nature, right? He's the one that takes care of the birds and raises them, and probably carries out the ceremony that we didn't get to see in the movie because they got cut short by Proximus's groups coming in and laying waste to everything. But yeah, so we always saw them as, you know, it's like Noah isn't the king's son. He's the guy who has worked really hard to get to his station in life. He's his son. You know what I mean? So there's a lot to lose.
Yeah. This is a question that I'm curious about, but I don't know if you have an answer to. But from Cassandra Durantes, is there going to be a novelization of Kingdom?
I don't know, actually. That'd be awesome if there was. I don't know how that stuff works, actually. I don't think my previous movies, they were all novels first. The Maze Runner books, they were books written before me. So I don't know how that works. That'd be awesome. But I'd also love to see, like, for instance, like an art book. Man, we did so much freaking art on this movie. It's amazing, amazing work by really talented people. I'd love to see that. I don't know if I'll ever convince them to help me let me do that, but I'd love to see it.
Yeah, me too. An art book. I think actually a long time ago. I remember someone like posted something about an art book, and you comment on it on Reddit or something. But yeah, that's something that I think would be so cool to see. I don't know if there are art books for the previous three movies. There might be. I just haven't read them, but just looking at all the concept art and I feel like every few months I see new concept art released, and I'm just continuously like in just really amazed by all the stuff you guys did.
Emma Shepherd says in Dawn of War they gave Cornelia a flower crown and that stuff. Like, yeah, that's all you can do is like short of giving them lipstick or long eyebrows, you give them like feminine jewelry. And it's just we didn't want to go there. We wanted to make sure that the face itself felt appealing, right? And I think in that scene that you just saw with earlier with Suna in the light, like you see it. It's just a very appealing ape to look at. Um, but uh, but yeah, we talked a lot about all those things. You know what I mean? In terms of like that kind of stuff. Except for Avril, you said a lot or they've said a lot of stuff, but I asked if they would do prosthetic practical makeup on characters, if I ever did another one. And I have to admit, while the idea is a romantic one, I wouldn't because I think it wouldn't work now with what audiences are expecting. Um, I think the best to do it was the Tim Burton's movie, and Tim Roth in particular. That character makeup stuff
Yeah,
was
that
freaking
it's
fantastic.
phenomenal. Yeah.
But what happens there is that you're having to the character has to be so like over the top almost, and like you can see it in the performance and it works, but you have to do so much to push through the prosthetics that's basically covering up any subtlety that you want to do as an actor, that it does limit you to some degree. And again, totally appreciate the effort that goes into those things, but I just don't think that with where we expect Apes movies to go with the kind of the subtlety of performance that we have now, you just wouldn't be able to pull it off with prosthetics anymore, you know? But like I said, it's a romantic notion and it's a neat idea. But usually, in my experience, the people that use a lot of prosthetics and stuff in the movies that want to cling to that sort of idea, um, they usually get replaced by VFX or cleaned up by VFX because the eyes of audiences today are just way more sophisticated. Our resolution on our cameras are way more are more high resolution. So you see the fake essentially. And so, that's not for everything, of course. There's a lot of great prosthetics houses that do some amazing work. But I think for particularly these apes characters that their arms are super long, their eyes aren't quite right, that there's no human makeup that would fit into that design there. Um, you're just kind of stuck with doing it CG, and doing it that way. But yeah. You're muted, Josh.
Yeah, it's something that I've always been curious to see. Like, could it work in today's landscape with today's audiences and their sensibilities? And I'm with you. I
It's
don't think it
yeah, it's
could.
possible,
It's
and, yeah,
there's
it's
incredible makeup that's been done today, so it's anything could.
absolutely, yeah.
I'd probably be all for
I
it,
think
but
like Guillermo del Toro does some amazing
yeah,
stuff with some of his guys, but he also designs characters that are really like made for prosthetics. You know what I mean? Um, so it's a trick. It's like anything with movies. Like you have a vision for something and you figure out which method do I use to best pull off the thing. You know what I mean? And fortunately, so much work has been done doing these movies, these Planet of the Apes movies this way with visual effects that it's a known quantity. We're not going into like a unknown territory here anymore. We know how to do these things. So and it's reasonably straightforward, difficult and challenging, but we know the end result. You know what I mean? And then it's about like, okay, there's so much experience been built up doing that stuff now. How far can we push it? That's kind of the big question there. But yeah, shout out to definitely to like Rick Baker and the crew and all those guys and even what a workshop, they do some fantastic stuff too. There's always going to be a place for it, but in particular, our case with these movies, I don't see it being the future for it.
yeah, it makes sense. It definitely makes sense. Here's a question that I'm curious about, and I don't think you can say much about. From Ethan Doyle, Wes, can you confirm or hint that Caesar's
Mhm.
bloodline is still around?
I don't want to. I love seeing everyone talking about the
Yeah,
Caesar Noah connection or not. So I'm not going to answer at all. But I know people noticed a little scar on his chest. Obviously, I was surprised at how much of a stir that caused, but it was definitely intentional. Um, but you also see how he got it. He wasn't born with it, So, but maybe that's his destiny, or fate or something. But who knows? We'll see what happens in the future with that kind of stuff. I don't know that it needs to be a bloodline. Could be cool, but I don't think it needs to be either. So.
gotcha. Okay, yeah. All right, here's another interesting question, kind of related to Caesar from Emmett Shepard. Do you think Andy Serkis would come back as Caesar for a flashback or a vision scene?
Yeah, sure. I talked to him about it. I actually talked to him
Yeah,
about playing Koro or
that
Proximus.
was good. I
You
was
know what
going
I
to
mean? And
ask, was he
yeah,
ever going to be in the
I,
movie?
I mean, I'm friends with Andy. I cast in my Mouse Guard movie, and I met him. Matt Reeves introduced him to me through that. And then when he came on to do the Apes thing, I called Andy, one of the first person I talked to, and asked him what am I getting into here? And he was just been a great friend on that front, and he was helpful in our London premiere too, and he's really just a really incredible human being, a really nicest guy ever, super incredibly talented as well, not just as an actor, but as a director and all that kind of stuff. Um, but uh, but yeah, it just didn't work, and I don't know. Once you played Caesar, would you want to go in and do a little cameo or like a little like character that's in it for 10 minutes? I'm not sure. It's like I don't know. I'm not sure it would work, but we'll see what happens in the future. You know what I mean? We'll see. We'll see.
Here's a question that actually I'm very in agreement with, but from Andrew Krishkevich. The score in the movie is one of the best in years. John Paisano's thematic writing is unbelievable. Can you please talk about your collaboration? I loved Paisano's music. It was
Good
fantastic.
question. I think it's Andre. Is that right? Um, Good stuff. Yeah, John. I've made all my movies with John. Um, he is one of the few guys that still works in those thematic ideas. So much of our stuff is more ambient, sort of, textural, but I still love the old school thematic stuff. Um, as old fashioned as it is. But yeah, John and I've been working together for a long, long time now, and he and I start really early. Actually, when I was first even just thinking about this thing, I would talk to him about the movie and show him some artwork, and he would start just making sketching themes on the piano and sending them to me. This is before we even had a script, So that's how early John and I are kind of messing around together, and we're doing it even now as we speak on another movie. Um, so that's kind of his process. And he sees the movie and it all changes again. You know what I mean? And the trick here was I told him basically that, look, it's got to be one part Jerry Goldsmith, one part Giacchino, and the rest is yours. You know what I mean? So it's like finding a way where the DNA feels like it all comes from the same place. That way it kind of sounds like familiar elements but at the same time, John needs to make it his own and kind of have his own themes, and he's got them all over this movie, of course. But to have those little like throwbacks essentially to that kind of Jerry Bruckheimer, Goldsmith kind of thematic stuff it was a lot of fun for John, I think, and he had a lot of great time with it. It was a really difficult process, I think, writing all this stuff, but I'm glad you recognized it because I think it should be recognized. And it's always a thing about how much do you kind of mix it up or down in the movie, but we tried to get it right. So, but the score is great. It's a good score to have. It's a good soundtrack to drive to, I think.
So this bit right here that's going on with everyone getting in place for the big third act going on here with teaming up with May, and I like that we bring back Suna and Anaya back into the fold for this last chunk of the movie, and this whole dynamic of people or apes is really fun. So I was curious, like, what was it like, kind of finding that I guess rhythm between the three of them as like a trio, as a group.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, that's one of those magic things where, I had this experience in Maze Runner where you cast a group of people that you hope get along, and then you put them together for like a little period of time before we start shooting. In our case, it was Ape School, and you just hope that they become a little family. And I had that on Maze Runner, and I definitely had that here on Apes. You know what I mean? It just worked. We found the right people that were good, hardworking, devoted people that became a little family together, took care of each other and root each other on and supported each other. And it's like that's half the job a little bit on my end. You cast the movie well, all that stuff that you can't buy, you can't invent, it finds its way on screen somehow. Even if it's through a digital character. You know what I mean? So a little bit of that dynamic I think comes through just with them, because they love each other. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, so it was a fun time, and the three of them are really great, and it'll be fun to kind of explore them further, I think.
Yeah. And then seeing this moment going on with May taking Trevathan out, this is, I think, probably the most shocking moment in the entire movie, for me at least.
Yeah, cool.
And it's like, it's not something you see a character like this in this type of movie traditionally do. And so I was
Yeah,
just
sure.
so
Yeah,
blindsided by
hopefully it's
it.
a bit of a shock. It's like,
Yeah.
again, for me, it's the point of view. It's the point of view of Noah in particular. He sees what humans are capable of.
Yeah.
The animal is seeing the animal, essentially, right? And it's a great kind of dramatic moment there for both characters. Like I think you see the shame and the regret on her here, but knowing that she'll do what she has to do, that she thinks she has to do, right? I think that it shows you that I don't know, you go into this third act with a kind of a sense of unease and not sure about who you can trust. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
yeah, it was a cool moment. We actually
Is that
talking about Trevathan, as a character with Josh writing it. There was another version we killed him a different way, but equally as kind of I guess brutal and graphic. But yeah, it was cool.
Gotcha. Is that kind of meant to be, I don't know if it's really ever said, but is that meant to be like her first time killing, or is that something she's done
Hmm.
before?
I think May is pretty damn tough, man. Um, has she killed before? I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. I haven't actually asked that. Um, I'll tell you that she was certainly capable of killing before, for sure.
Gotcha. All right, so going back to some more
I mean,
questions.
she literally knows how to hold the freaking
Yeah,
thing. You know what I mean?
exactly.
So like,
Like
she
she
knows
seems
how to
very
kill.
much like she's trained
Yeah,
and
she's
practiced
capable.
this
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
But from Andy, how far did you push the subject of the apes being clothed? They're more clothed than Caesar's generation, but not entirely to the point of the original or Tim Burton's
Yeah.
movie. Good
I have a
question.
lot of designs of clothed apes too that we explored, and just to see where that spectrum we wanted to land. Because ultimately, we got to get there. We got to get there. Even with Raka, I have a ton of stuff with him, like wearing robes and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, end up with that one little sash. But Koro in particular, he has a lot of clothing. It's like ceremonial in a way, but it's cool. But yeah, that's the stuff that we're thinking about. Is like where on that trajectory do we want to land? And I would imagine on future movies you'll see even more clothing kind of make its way in until we, ultimately end up in a place that, is similar to the 68 version.
Yeah.
They're getting further
Um,
and further away from being animals. You know what I mean?
exactly. So let's see. Here's another one. Oh, here's a good one. And something that a lot of Apes fans talk about. So I'm curious your thoughts on this one from KR. Will we see gibbons? They've been mentioned in the novelizations. They're also mentioned
I
in
would
this
love to see
movie,
gibbons.
but I
I'd
want to
love
see
to
one so
see
badly.
gibbons. Yeah, I think me too. So hopefully we'll see. That's why
Okay.
at least I could do is talk about them. That they do exist in the apes world. So
Okay.
now it's up to someone, whether it's me or someone else, to figure out how to get them into the movie.
Someone actually asked me this on a live chat last week, and I didn't really have an answer because I don't really know. But do you think like gibbons and other like monkeys, like they can talk and are smart too, or is it really just the great apes
No,
that have been
actually.
affected?
Yeah,
Really?
gibbons are actually aren't. Yeah, they're not actually apes. I don't think they can talk. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe the virus had some effect on them where they can be a little bit more intelligent, I suppose. That's possible, but I don't think they should talk. I think that's uniquely a great ape kind of phenomenon for me.
Okay. From Gentle Savage, Wes. By the end of War for the Planet of the Apes, a lot of apes knew how to use guns. How come in Kingdom, this skill was never passed on to the next generation of apes? Interesting question.
Well, it's actually pretty a good reason because guns only survive as long as the infrastructure is around to support them. So you might have a gun and you might have some bullets, but eventually those bullets are going to run out. And if you don't have the infrastructure to make gunpowder, to pack bullets, to make bullets, to set the charger and the primer and all the stuff that goes into making weaponry like that, after 50 years, it's done. That's why you see in all the zombie movies the best weapon is use the bow and arrow, not just for the quiet thing, because it can be repeated. You know what I mean? You can grab that arrow back and use it again. Um, so to me, guns were gone, pretty quickly after the end of the human civilization. And so yeah, it makes sense to me that it would kind of be lost essentially to time of what these bang sticks were or whatever they're called. You know what I mean? But electricity, I think, is totally viable because engines and motors would probably still basically a magnet and coil of wire, right? So you can actually create some of that stuff. You can kind of get there quicker. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's my thinking on it.
Gotcha. Okay. Another super chat, thank you, from Kareem Harper. I am disappointed we don't get full commentary tracks as the norm anymore with physical media. Why? I agree. We should. Really
Well, I
appreciate
do
this.
have the
Thank you, Josh and
commentary on
Wes.
our thing,
Yeah.
and the rock cut thing is on a thing. Again, I wanted the raw cut to be on the regular Blu-ray, but they put it on the fancy version of the disc, and then not in the UK version or whatever. And it's like it's disappointing on that front. But at least we got it out there, and like I said, they don't really do features anymore. So I'm glad they let me do the feature, and I'm glad they put it on Disney Plus, for people to watch that way if they have it. But I'm with you. I'd love to have more stuff, and partly I'm thinking is like the right way to do it is to take it in your own hands. Do what you're doing here today, where it's like, what stops you and me watching and us watching the movie together and having a conversation about it? I don't need to be. That doesn't have to be
Yeah.
sanctioned. That doesn't have to be
Yeah.
a thing on a disc. It's like that can live forever. So like maybe it's just we need like a channel or a group that just they do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I used to grow up on this movie, this series called Movie Magic. It was on Discovery Channel, and they just did these great behind the scenes stories about like his visual effects and special effects. But like, maybe this needs to be a really great kind of like channel, that can be run by just some smart people that cultivates all this stuff and makes it something that we can all enjoy because I still love it. I still go back and watch all those things.
Oh yeah. I do too. I have tons of Blu-rays and stuff. I still haven't looked at some of the features, and I every once in a while just find a couple, and I want to just watch through all the behind the scenes stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, from Talking Ape for Wes, love the Joseph Campbell's overtones. Joseph Campbell overtones. Have you read or studied Campbell at all?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, that's like it's like the first thing you study in film school, I think. But it is a fascinating kind of study at myth and and sort of human um, history, essentially. Over thousands of years, we tend to gravitate towards certain structures and types of stories, types and characters that from I mean almost to the point when we were just starting to kind of like draw on the walls, like there's something in our minds, our human minds, that craves story and particular types of story. And I think that is a fascinating kind of study that Joseph Campbell did. Whether you choose to break those rules or not, it's a good to have a foundation and sort of that study that he did, I think. And I think a lot of movies obviously have used those findings and stuff.
Gotcha. So now we're getting to the part here where she finds
The
the
visual
the
effects in
book.
Mufasa the Lion King. Sorry, someone, Ella's Mindrind, I guess, asked me about the visual effects and Mufasa. Well, I think they were great, but it's one of my buddies, Barry Jenkins, who directed it. So I'm not going to say anything bad because I went to school, we went to school together, and we're buddies. Yeah, all good. And it's also, it's in the same family of movies and stuff. So I appreciate it all.
Yeah. Um, this stuff here with the apes seeing what they used to be from hundreds of years
Yeah,
ago. That is, I think this was some of the most powerful stuff, at least image wise, in the movie. Not a single word is spoken among the three of them, but you can just know exactly, or at least have an idea of what they're thinking and how they're feeling just from what they're looking at. And
yeah,
I'm so curious to see, and I'm sure you have ideas, but like where that's gonna go and what not like they're taking in this new knowledge, and I'm curious how
yeah,
other apes are gonna take this kind of stuff.
yeah. I agree. I mean, you hit it. That to me is where I'm proud of the scenes in the movies where not a word is spoken, but you know everything you need to know. Like that's just visual storytelling. That's what cinema is to me. So yeah, I appreciate the scene, and I think it asks all the right questions, and you're asking all the right questions.
Perfect. All right, let's see here. Oh, here's a good question from Lewis. For Wes, there were a lot of fan theories that May was an astronaut prior to the release of the movie. Did you ever consider including the astronauts from Rise in the movie's plot? I get talked about this on the channel all the time.
Nope. Sorry. For me, no. Um, but I understand, and obviously I am very aware that space and stars and all that stuff is a very important theme in the films. But in this movie, this particular one, it was not going to happen, at least in my mind. But we'll see what happens in the future.
Now, this scene right here, I was always like, I'm assuming the plan was just run out and then you know light the light the bomb off, right? Or not the bomb,
Yeah.
the thing, right? Okay. So did they ever? I'm curious in your mind, they weren't considering the fact that like other apes might be around or like when they open the door.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, like I said, like you get to your clan, and I'll trigger the explosive. It's like
Yeah.
Noah's gonna go, guys, get out of the way. We're gonna do this thing. It's time.
Okay.
Boom. Meanwhile, while no, well, Proximus was like, my doors are open, yay! He'd be standing there looking at that thing, and then they would just go off and do what they got to do. You know what I mean? And escape. Noah just wants to go home. He wants to free his people.
Ooh, here's a good question. Um. Also, I love this shot of Proximus. By the way, this just that menacing hulking thing he does, especially with his eyes, and just it's really really cool. One of my favorite shots of him.
Maybe I'll come back to you, Jade Dinosaur. I don't know about that question. Go
um.
ahead.
Okay, from Jesse. May was gifted Raka's pendant by Noah in the end. Does this mean that in a way she'll also do her part in carrying Caesar's legacy thanks to her bond with them?
It's a good question. I don't think she knows much about Caesar, but I do think that symbol from Noah is a token of friendship, of trust to some degree. Um, and so maybe that's in the spirit of Caesar, if not literally the word of Caesar himself. You know what I mean? So
Gotcha. Okay. Um, the way I just really love the way that Proximus interact. Like he's such a you still see that, and it's coming up in just a second, but you have this stark shift, and he still thinks he's in control of everything going on. And the second that the gun goes off, it's a complete flip. And I just always thought I think that's such a really it's a great moment on Kevin's part and the animation part and the character. Just it's a really great scene. I really love this whole moment right here.
Yeah, and it's funny as hell when his guy is dead on the floor. Everyone's looking down, and no, and Proximus is smiling. He's
Yeah,
like,
all he can think about is the
"That's
gun. Yeah, yeah,
that's what I want. I want
yeah.
that. Are there more of those in there?" That's what he is. He's a power hungry guy. He's smart, all that kind of stuff. But it shows you what power and that kind of lust for power can do. It can set you astray.
Okay, let me
Yeah,
see.
we say several generations later, but in my mind, it was about 300 years. It was like just enough for a lot to be lost, but not so far that something couldn't be survived. So 300 years is my unofficial time span.
Okay, gotcha. Um,
Someone
Another
was asking the
question.
credit.
Gotcha. Sim for Avril. I'll watch a Planet of the Apes movie even if it has the Lord of the Rings runtime. I would too. I would too. Give me a four
Yeah,
and a half hour
you
Peter Jackson length runtime.
maybe, I don't know.
Um,
I say that too often, but you end up going, you know, it's not always my choice. Let's just say that.
gotcha. Yeah,
I'm not
I get.
paying. I'm
Yeah,
not paying for this. I'm not paying the hundred and something million dollars,
yeah.
to pay for it. So I have to some degree. I can have my fights, have my battles, but sometimes you gotta, you know, go with your boss.
Gotcha. Next one here. From Paul O'Loughlin. How difficult was it working with water during the film's climax, combined with all of the motion capture and visual effects? It's my favorite
That
part of
was
the
a
movie.
good question because there actually was no water. It's all CG. So I didn't have to deal with the water at all, basically. It's all CG. So this is a full CG shot. There's no real water there. We're on a parking lot right here. Actually, not too far away from where the bridge set was made in the parking lot. So,
It's
you know,
just,
it's all movie magic.
it's incredible. It's
Yeah.
like the
But a lot
every
of like even this
single,
stuff.
yeah,
Oh, that's the
that's
real shop. Even the mountain
it's
behind her is
nuts.
CG. Yeah. Then we built the little doors. We built the doors, but even sometimes those get replaced too because the water has to interact with them. Like all
Yeah,
that water back there, that's all CG water. That's not real water. It's not even a miniature. That's a plate that we shot on the set, but all that water's fake. It's real. It's just CG.
it really
From
is.
here on, the movie is all CG basically until I think it's all CG. Well, I'll point out the few one or two shots where it has a plate. That's a little plate right there. That's a plate of the stage floor. That's a somewhat of a plate. But obviously, we didn't build that ship. We didn't build that water, the dam, or we had the little slice of the doors basically. But so yeah, it's kind of fun, that you can do this kind of stuff, and it really is a testament to Weta and the talent they have, because they did a lot of research and R&D and stuff for their Avatar: Way of Water, of course, on the work in there, and we took all that work and leveraged all that experience they got on that movie and just pushed it into this one, obviously. So we got a lot of the same team to come in and lend their expertise to make this stuff look as good as it possibly could, because water is like the hardest thing to do in CG.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things. Part of the raw cut are those shots that are fully CG because it's just you see a shot of a plate or nothing, and there's just these little references just all over the
Yeah,
screen of what you pulled from, and it's
yeah.
mind
So
blowing to me
a
that
lot
that
of it,
all
like
turns
for
into
instance, there
this.
on Dar, she's just on a chair and we're just pushing her along, in a chair. She's waving her arms, so it's like it's really silly. You feel pretty silly when you're out there doing it, and you're not in these environments. We didn't build these environments. It's all CG too. Now there's a plate. Boom. We're in a parking garage right now for a couple shots here. Um, but the actors have to kind of use their imagination, and like that's a plate right there, but no water, of course, but yeah, they have to kind of, that's almost more difficult in a way to get the water to kind of sit into a plate that we shot where there is no water. Um and then so all the water dripping off their fur and all this crazy stuff. It's just, I mean, it's just absolutely amazing, 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 amazing work. So this is the last, I think, plate we have until basically Proximus falls, I think. And the rest of it's all CG. So all that water and all the rivets and the water dripping and all that kind of stuff. It's just nuts. Um, but so a lot of the fight and stuff that happens with Sylva, which is fun to do. What I had them do is out on our stage, which is basically a little obstacle course, and I just had them running around, and we had to figure out how to kind of create the resistance of trudging through water. How do you do it? And we experimented with bungee cords, and we experimented with, like, holding their feet while they ran, And ultimately, I just said, go grab me that 20-pound sandbag, which is this little sandbag that you carry around on set with the grips. And so I just stuck it onto their feet, and I took some duct tape and I just taped it to their feet, their ankles. These 20-pound sandbags. Sometimes they did more. They did 30 pounds, and they just ran around after each other in this crazy environment. And lo and behold, it freaking worked. It worked so well. Like the motion capture looked pretty damn good for them trying to kind of use all their body weight to kind of push themselves through this water. And so those are kind of the tricks that we do, but all this stuff, like all this water, all this kind of stuff here, it's all CG. I mean, not just the apes in the water, but like the pipes and the lights and everything. It's all CG. So it's really cool. It's really fun. We're definitely super proud of the work there. All the reflection and the light going on and here and this awesome moment, like this light kind of blinking. It's just good, cool, awesome stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I keep gushing about it, but it's just, I keep looking at these specifically these shots of Sylva and Noah and their wet apes and the wet fur and
Yeah.
just everything that goes into it.
Like all the
It's
little bubbles in the water,
insanity.
there's a little particle system that's driving those little bubbles in the water. Just that little detail. Like I remember seeing a version of the shot where it didn't have those, and I thought it was pretty damn good. And then they showed me the next version, they had the little bubbles, like, oh, now looks even more real. So it's like, they're just really great. This is
For
all
sure.
CG, you're all through here. Again, we didn't build this environment. We didn't have the time or money to build this environment. We just did it in CG. This is all pipes. You know what I mean? It's like if there's one CG environment you're going to want to build, it's this one. It's not. It's like you can pull this off, and then it's about like spending all your time on this water and like watching Sylva, disappear behind that water. It had to be art directed just so carefully so that his eyes disappeared at just the right moment. It was like it's really amazing stuff.
Yeah.
But that's not the only that's all CG. The next bit's all CG, right? We had a set like here, we had a set, but most of that just gets replaced, by a CG version because it's easier to put all the apes in there with their shadows and everything. You know what I mean? So like, there's an example there where like part of the set's built, but boom, now we're almost all of that's full CG. You know what I mean? So it's really kind of amazing. Yeah,
All right. Next
it was fun to
question
do this
here.
little sequence here.
Yeah.
It's another one of those cases where this camera's just totally active and like spontaneous and like we're not doing clean plates. We're just shooting. You know what I mean? This felt
Yeah.
like what we do usually on Maze Runner, just really kind of chaotic, cameraman in the action, it was fun. And it creates a kind of sense of reality that I think is really hard to do otherwise.
It's really that's what part of what's really impressive about the evolution of motion capture and performance capture is what how you can pretty much you can shoot it the way you would shoot any other film at this point, at least from
Yeah,
everything I've
to
seen.
some
Like
degree.
the way you can
Yeah.
use the camera, like there are things that I assume you wouldn't have been able to do 20 years ago with this technology that you can do easily now.
Yeah. Although even the cameras here, they're all pretty standard camera moves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nothing impossible going on here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, next question from Victor. Hey Wes, is Raka's knowledge about Caesar pretty much much the same as the audience's, or are there holes that were lost to time, much love
Yeah,
from
there's
Brazil?
definitely holes lost to time. Yeah, there's definitely that game of telephone that happens over generations that things have been lost. You know what I mean? But I think what we show that with Raka is that the spirit of Caesar survived through him. The compassion, the empathy, the strength, all that kind of stuff. Whereas something different survived on Proximus's side, right? Where H together strong means something very different to him than it does Raka. All that spit and stuff. You know what I mean?
I know
It's so good.
it's insane,
Uh,
and
yeah, it's amazing.
like the cut on his head and the fur and the blood, it's
Yeah, you
it,
you buy it. It feels real. Yeah,
yeah.
it's awesome.
You really you like it, it's exactly like you don't think about you're watching a CGI ape. You just think
Yeah.
how I'm bought in because you care about the character. I care about Noah. I'm bought in with the emotion of it all.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a big part of it.
Yeah. See this, yeah, like I was talking about earlier, like when this first started happening, I'm like, what's going on? How is this gonna go? But then it really builds and I love that all they all start singing with them and it's just a really it's an unexpected but I think really epic way to close out this story.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. I was pretty worried about it too when we were making it. It's like, shit, is this gonna work?
Yeah.
You know, um, and we had to shoot it. a couple times with Noah in reshoots just to get the audio working basically. But the vibe was right. It was like this kind of aggressive chant more than it is just singing. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
And so a big part of it was John Paisano, who really kind of he took all these little pieces together and he sort of made it musical and cut that together for me. And then I had Owen perform that. You know what I mean? So it was this kind of back and forth of trying to find something that would work, where it wasn't just like a Disney, musical. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Exactly.
Which obviously would have been a disaster. But
Yeah. Um, Thank you to David Orlano for some more support. Really appreciate that, man. Thank you.
dang,
Another question from Richard McCauley. Many thanks to Josh and Wes for doing this and for reading my questions. Thanks to Rick, who mentioned where to get the arms. I already look like an orangutan. Anyway, apes together is strong.
congratulations.
um, okay, speaking of the fight here, from Jade Dinosaur. At the end, Noah fights Proximus, though I believe the apes don't fight each other as much in the classic movies. Is this more because the technology allows for it or because the audience demands it?
That's a good question. But in the real ape kingdom, the fights between apes are brutal. I mean, vicious. So it's not uncommon or anything. I think what most people were like, why weren't the other apes helping to fight? And that's just not in the ape kind of instinct, essentially. The alphas go after each other, you know what I mean? You let them go, and then whoever wins, that's who you are suddenly now with. So yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think they probably couldn't have done a lot of that in the early movies, probably just because of tastes have changed. Where really really brutal, realistic fights they didn't really do a lot of those, right? They were all kind of Hollywood fights, and the blood was super bright red. Now it's totally different. We don't we laugh at that kind of stuff now. So imagine just a little bit of all those things.
Gotcha. Um, Harkening back to what we were talking about with the practical makeup and stuff earlier from Andy. Shout out to Rick Baker and crew who worked on the 2001 movie. It's hard to say, but agree that more than likely not going to happen. Even Rick loves Weta's work on these films. Awesome.
Yeah, and I think Rick in particular. He's a real artist. He's a storyteller and like a filmmaker in a way. So it's like he appreciates the illusion, this the end result. It's just he knows how to use his art form and prosthetics to get to the end result that is important to him. So I think he could obviously appreciate great visual effects makeup just as much as a great visual effects artist can appreciate Rick Baker's makeup effects. You know what I mean? It's all the tools and processes that we use in filmmaking to make people believe in something that's unbelievable. You know what I mean? That's what we do.
This scene right here. This is my favorite moment in the entire movie, and
What's that?
I just this going on with Noah and May having this just full on one on one conversation. I think it's really powerful. I think it's really interesting. It's really just engaging.
Mm,
Just
cool.
everything you take everything that Noah's learned up to this point in the movie, and now finally seeing him kind of unload in a way, and also you see everything that May's learned about apes up to this point and bringing that to the table. It's just I think it's a really and then Noah the question that Noah asks with should we just go back to silence? I think that's a really powerful question right
Yeah,
there.
totally.
Yeah, yeah,
And what of apes? What is for apes? We just go back to silence?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And this scene took a lot of iterations. There's lots of versions of it. Sometimes she pulls the gun, sometimes she hugs him, sometimes she leaves him. It's like
Yeah,
we shot a lot of
there
stuff here, and
are.
we spent a lot of time thinking about how to um make the scene work. So
Yeah, I remember. I don't remember where it was from. Maybe it was like some behind the scenes thing. But there's this shot of Owen and Freya with Owen still in his mocap suit, and they're holding each other. I assume it's from
mhm.
this ending scene. So I was curious, like I was always curious how or why you decided to cut that, or how you ultimately ended with this version of that scene and their
Yeah, it
resolution
just
in it.
felt the right version. You
Yeah.
know, it's the thing about movies. You never know. You
Oh
never
yeah,
know
for sure.
until it all comes together.
Okay.
You have all these
Oh,
ideas of what you think's going to work until you see it all put together and you see the sum of its parts. It's impossible to ultimately know. So you be
um,
careful. You try to shoot different versions and
yeah.
cover yourself.
I think the one you came up with ultimately is the one that it works. It works
Oh,
for
there's
this
a
story.
Jade dinosaur one. I don't know. I haven't actually heard these essays. I've seen about these essays written about the metaphor that we can't trust white women. But I don't know. Maybe there's something to be discussed there. I don't know. So I don't. I'm not gonna touch that. But it
Yeah,
certainly
yeah,
wasn't on
yeah,
my mind when we were writing
yeah, yeah.
this. I'll say that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Next one from Bookworm Dazzle. Is there anything you can share about Raka's companion we couldn't meet, like his name, or how the bonding ceremony works that we didn't get to see?
Um, I don't know. Read into it what you will. Orangutans are supposedly naturally very solitary creatures, so it means a lot when they have a companion like that. Um, but I think it's also just the idea that he's lost like Noah's lost. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. You can read into it whatever you like.
Interesting. Okay. Now, of course, now here we get to the scene that another one similar to um, earlier that completely shocked me. I assumed we would probably get another human in the movie, but I didn't know how. I didn't know when. I didn't know in what context. So this whole ending bit with May bringing the thing to this group of humans, how much do you know about them at this point? Like, obviously you can't say anything at all, I'm assuming, but how much kind of work did you guys do at building out who these people are, what they're doing, and where they potentially might be going next with their part of the story?
Yeah, I mean, we thought a lot about it, but I can't tell you what it is because that's kind of what I always said that this is like the beginning of the next movie, not the end of this movie. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, I got you. Yeah,
there's a lot here. I
um,
mean, you're basically saying, oh, there's other humans that are
yeah,
still trying to hold on. You know what I mean? And they have
mhm,
technology to some degree, and they're trying to connect with others out there. I mean, it's a big idea, right? At the very last 3 minutes of the movie. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Um,
It's a great way to end the story. I think it's a great, like you said, it's the beginning of it's the new next beginning. But I think
that's right.
that is a great way to end Noah's first story.
Yeah, right. And they're both these two characters kind of in their respective worlds, kind of contemplating what's next, you
Yeah,
know?
and then
And I
also
think
we get
there's just so much potential there.
for sure, and we also get, of course, Noah and Suna going off, not with Anaya, interestingly. And I'm curious. Obviously, there's a some sort of romance building there,
Three's
and
a crowd, man. I'd love to have Anaya there, but three's a crowd.
yeah, yeah. Um, is that something you're interested in exploring at all in the next movie? That relationship between the two of them, or even the three of them, how that whole dynamic might shift? Or
Yeah,
maybe not
man. I
giving
would
much
I would
thought to it yet.
expect it. Yeah, I
No.
would
Okay.
expect it.
Okay.
Yeah, you know.
This is.
You've
I
got three
think.
characters that have been changed forever,
Yeah. I think it was
So,
a great choice ending
imagine
on these
lots of
two shots.
yes, that by the way, guys, that asked the other kind of friend of May's there, that is Deechin Lockman. That's Miss Casey from Severance. She's
Um,
awesome. I
yeah,
asked her to do
she's
it
great.
because I have these plans. I didn't just want this extra there. I wanted someone that you realize, oh, might be someone important. You know what I mean? So that when you're watching this, that you feel like there's more to be told here. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think I would expect to see more of Deechin
Okay.
in the
Awesome.
futures.
Um, all right. From David Easter. Hi, Wes. Loved Kingdom and really hope you get to do more apes. I want to shout out the idea of a full CG mocap for Zelda, Ready Player One style. You've got the experience directing it.
Duly noted. Not necessarily my choice on that front, but I understand completely.
Okay, yeah. Um, and another question from Andy. I have to talk about the heavy-set, droopy-eared chimp. What has been using him since Rise, but he's been used so much throughout the film. I'm not 100%
Interesting. Yeah, I
sure.
mean, I know what you're talking about. What it has, a
Okay.
certain library of apes that are kind of generic apes that kind of show up, and some a little fatter, some a little skinnier, some a little different. But yeah, they're there for sure. You're right. You gotta cut costs somehow. You know what I mean?
For
We
sure.
had more new apes on this movie than I think the previous ones um, ever had. Like we had to like not only just create new apes, but they all had to talk. They all had to look different. They had to be designed, modeled, all that stuff. You know what I mean? So what it had their hands absolutely full. So any shortcuts they had to take were so that we could accomplish everything else.
From Matt Hemming, I love this movie, a worthy successor to Caesar's trilogy and a strong start to the new one. Can't wait to see what comes next. Question for West: have you read Caesar's Story by Maurice? I think it's a little book that was made. I don't remember when it was made, but it was made as I think as part of the
No,
marketing for the original
I don't know that I
trilogy.
did.
And
That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah, it's like a
That's I have to
Caesar's
check
story
that
from
out.
Maurice's point
Surprising,
of
I'm
view.
not. Yeah, it's surprising I'm not aware of that because that's kind of like what I
Yeah,
always had in my head is that
yeah,
Maurice went off and wrote a book like that. Interesting.
yeah, yeah. I've never read it. I've heard it's really cool, so I want to check it out eventually.
He said movie credits
Um,
end with a music track named "A New Age." The music is not in the film, but it's a great title and theme. Yeah, that was one of the first themes John wrote for me when we were first dreaming up the movie. Actually,
really? Okay, interesting.
hmm one of the
All
first ones.
right.
It's much more elaborate, but ultimately, just it wasn't. It didn't quite make its way into any particular scene. But you're right; it's a cool theme.
All right. All right, well, that is it for our watch along with Kingdom Planet of the Apes, but we still have a bunch of questions here. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, but we'll stick around here for a little bit and then we'll wrap things up because there's some interesting questions here I want to ask Wes. Um, one of them actually,
Yeah.
you
By the
can,
way, guys, someone's asking. Yeah, you can go find me on Twitter. It's Wes Ball at
yeah, that was
Twitter.
what I was going to get to. Um, okay, here's
I'm a little
one. I don't know if you'll
distracted,
have
so
it.
bear with me, but I'll check it out.
Um, from Leap, how many humans actually live in that base? Do they have to keep their numbers low to survive? I don't know if you know the answer to that one.
I think the base is a lot bigger than you probably see in the movie, actually. But yeah, we'll see. I think
Okay.
it's a fair number of them, enough to have a pretty diverse group there. You know what I mean?
Another one from Gentle Savage. Wes, is the idea of what apes in other countries are doing something you've ever thought about? Something we touched on earlier a little bit.
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit. Absolutely, yeah. I think it'd be smart to assume that other countries had the same issues that plagued the ones we saw, for sure.
For another one from Gentle Savage. Wes, are there any other genres and tonal influences that you'd like to take inspiration from for future apes movies, apart from Apocalypto influence in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes?
Gosh, that's a good question. There definitely is, but I can't say them because then they'd be like spoilers. So, you know, talk to me after the movie's comes out.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was one of my because you mentioned that I think like over a year before the movie even came out. So I actually went and watched Apocalypto before I
Yeah.
saw Kingdom because I'd never seen it before, and you can definitely see it. Obviously, there's a lot of
Oh,
differences,
it's
but
very
just in
different. No
general,
one would
yeah,
draw that
yeah,
conclusion, but yeah,
yeah,
that's like
yeah. But
most people. That there's some aspect of a film that you kind of like draw inspiration from, but it's not the whole film. You know what I mean? It's just things in it that you kind of pull from. That's what every what is it? Good artists copy, great artists steal. Isn't that little saying?
here's one. I'm actually it's not apes related, but I want to know the answer to this one because I always wanted to see this movie from you. But from the Spyro fans, can you post some more concept art from the Mouse Guard movie, Wes? Love seeing all of the artwork
Mm.
from that project. Would love to see some more art from it.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah, you're
agree.
right. I have a ton. I'll see if I can slip some out at some point. But yeah, I have so much. It's ridiculous. It's amazing, actually. Yeah.
Um, let's see here. Um, I'll ask this. Why not? I don't know if you can really give an answer on this one. From Ineffable, if we wanted a signed autograph of a poster of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, how could we do that?
Good question. Because I actually I have some spare posters I can give away too. I don't know. I'm open to ideas on how to make something like that work. If someone wants to reach out on Twitter or something and give me some ideas like how we could organize something like that, I'm totally open to it for sure.
Okay, there you go.
I don't know how you even go about doing it. You know what I mean? I can't
I
send out by hand 100, thousand, whatever,
see at that point
post office.
you need a team of people working on something like that at that point.
Yeah, but if
Um,
someone can figure it out, I'll happy to
yeah.
kind of help make it happen.
Here's a good question
I'm
from
I'm in New
Andy.
Zealand, Auckland. If anyone's around here, I can come sign.
Dara asked, what did Sylva exactly have in mind when he stopped for that
Oh
giant
man, that
wave?
was crow.
I
He was
love
just
that
like,
moment. Yeah. It's like, I'm gonna stop it.
it's like I'm a gorilla. Wave.
Yeah.
That's a
Um,
good. I like you caught that though. It's just
yeah,
a
yeah.
cool moment. It's like when you got nothing else to do, what are you gonna do but be yourself, and just give it your all. But you know what? He also survived all the way to the end, so you did something right.
Yeah. Not a question, but a comment that I agree with from Rachel Reed. This choice made a lot of people really dislike May, but I love how gray of a character she is. We get so many male rogue characters, but not so many women. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree too. Yeah, I mean, I tend to gravitate towards these complicated women characters for some reason. I don't know why. Um, but Teresa, I get the same comments from Teresa in the Maze Runner. But I understand it. Some people want their women characters to be kind of uncomplicated, I guess. But in this case, the story just it needed someone to be much more complex. So just so we can kind of set ourselves up for future movies.
Gotcha. This is a question I've heard people talk about this multiple times, and I don't know if it's ever been referenced by you, because the original Caesar movies were very, biblical in terms of their influence.
Mhm.
But from Planet of the Apes enthusiast, Wes here we see a flood and Noah saving people from one. Is that a reference to Noah and the flood from the Bible?
Yeah, maybe. And I won't say it's like overtly yes, but we talked about Joseph Campbell and these kind of biblical kind of ideas throughout all these movies. You know, these are kind of classic story types that always show up in these big kind of you know epics. So
Here's one, and I think you've actually mentioned this earlier, or at least from the visuals. From Larry, I wonder, Wes, what is your thoughts on the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes remake, or would you rather not say?
hmm. Yeah, it was like what year was that? That was like 90.
2001, I think. Yeah,
2001. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
was like
yeah.
21 years old. I was right out of college. I was already cynical, with that kind of stuff anyway. And I do think that movie kind of is at the end of an era of a type of movie. You know what I mean? It was kind of one of the last ones that was a type of movie then. Um, with that said though, like there's some great work in the movie. Like Tim Roth and the prosthetic work by Rick, it's incredible. It's like really, really good stuff. There's also cool themes in the movie, with the gun and all that kind of stuff, that we kind of play with. So, whatever. There's always I always tell people like once you've made a movie and you see just how freaking difficult it is, how so many things are against you, how the world around you just seems to like always get in your way of trying to make the perfect movie that you have in your head. It's impossible basically to make a movie. Once you've gone through it, it's hard to criticize a movie anymore. You know what I mean? So I can certainly not like a movie. I can certainly, you know, find things flaws in movies, but it's hard to criticize them in a way that doesn't come from a place of like, you know, you know, an appreciation for what it takes to make a movie. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, oh, here's one that I don't know if you've even given much thought to it because I've barely, but from Joel McDonald, is time travel a realistic concept in the reboots of this new
Hmm.
era of Apes movies?
That's a damn good question. I would argue that starting from like Dawn on, that it isn't. It doesn't feel like it to me in those the reality of those worlds. It's not actually a question I ever asked Matt actually. Um, but uh, but again, like I said, this is in my franchise. So it can certainly be a thing in this world, or it could not. We'll see what happens in the future movies.
Yeah, that's something I've always I'm curious if they could ever pull it off because whether it's you guys that
It's
make it or
tricky, time
it's
travel was originally, um, it was a big idea. It was interesting back in '68. I'm not sure that it would be received as positively today. You know what I mean? But then again, audiences change, man. So and they can
yeah.
make some interesting take and way to make it work. But part of that like underground bunker that I had was sort of my way of doing time travel. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's basically like it's a little message in a bottle. It's this little protected little, you know, bunker that's sealed off from the world. It kind of is time travel in a weird way, you know, because you're going back to a world that didn't that couldn't exist otherwise, you know. So it's not exactly what obviously the sci-fi kind of time travel thing, but that was like one way of thinking about, you know, how you preserve time, for instance, you know.
Gotcha. And it's hold
Yeah, definitely not telepathic mutants, huh? Hey, I cut the telepathic stuff in the Maze Runner. You know what I mean? So like, I didn't believe that there either. So I definitely wouldn't put it in an Apes movie.
Yes, speaking of the telepathic mutants, that was another question I had actually was, and obviously
I
there's,
think you could do something with the mutants, man. I
yeah,
think you could do
yeah,
something. So yeah,
okay,
I think there's a way into doing that. It wouldn't be the same, but you could
yeah.
do something.
I've heard people theorize that maybe it could be virus related rather than nuclear war related.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but I was curious if like that because obviously in the original movie it's the result of nuclear fallout and all this stuff. Do you see that happening in this future at all? Because obviously it hasn't happened yet. So do you think that's something we
Maybe,
could get to? Okay,
maybe. I'll tell you this. You know, the world's a pretty scary place right now, and the threat of kind of nuclear annihilation is suddenly seems more plausible than it ever has in my lifetime. Um, so, you know, in a weird way, it might be coming back around to being an idea that's going to show up in our stories. You know what I mean? We'll see.
gotcha.
Hopefully not.
Yeah. Well, that about does it. We're gonna wrap things up here now. That is, we've gotten through a lot of the all the super chat questions and a lot of you guys' questions in the live chat. A lot of really great questions you guys asked here. Wes, this was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got to watch the movie, talk about all these certain scenes, and get all these fans answering their questions. It was really
Definitely.
cool.
Like, I appreciate all
Yeah.
I'm sorry I couldn't keep up with all the comments, but like,
Yeah,
man, this was a
I
fantastic
was trying to keep
experience.
up, and I had to skip some, unfortunately. Otherwise we'd be here for 6 hours.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a lot of fun. I'm glad you guys hopefully had a lot of fun watching it with us. Wes, uh, hopefully you are involved in the next movie in some way, whether it's
Me too.
directing,
I
producing,
hope so.
writing, whatever you're doing. But I'm hopeful. I don't know about that 2027 release date, if and when that'll be out, but whenever it's coming, I will be there day one to watch it. And hopefully you're involved in some capacity. But
I hope so
anything you wanted
too.
to say about the movie and
No, just thank you guys, and
this
thanks Josh
experience?
for organizing this. It was a really cool, kind of fun thing, and I'm glad people showed up to, you know, participate. It was fantastic. Let's do it again sometime.
I'm sure there's a whole other 2.5 hours worth of stuff you could say about
That's
the movie.
right.
So sure, yeah,
That's
exactly.
right. All
But
right.
yeah, this was a lot of fun, guys. So thank you so much for joining me here. But until I see you guys in my next video, thanks so much for checking out this live watch along here on Ape Nation. If you liked it, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the
Go to the
notification bell
movie
so that you
theaters,
can stay
guys.
up to
Support the
date.
movie theaters.
Yes, go to the movie theaters. Go to the movie theaters. There's great movies out right now. Go see them. Um, but make sure you can subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date on all things apes. I'll see you in the next one. So until then, goodbye.